people up there. It sounded like we might only be keeping him down for about a month.
No,
The Braves did
he
that.
doesn't have my PowerPoint up yet.
His rookie year, spring training.
Is the screen on?
Yes, maybe those guys. And then they didn't make the roster.
We went to.
And they did it. Well, then they ended up signing him early anyway, so wasted it. Now he's signed for.
I knew that was what was.
It's my favorite stadium to go to, though. PNC.
Pittsburgh, I had the uniform up there a couple of times. And even all the ball players said all the best out there.
We're down one of our barns and lives like the stuff.
That Jones kid is a little. I didn't know.
Planners.
Yeah, that would make it easy.
Chris Ames and spring ball, and they said, we gotta bring him up.
I hope they make it around. That division's not terrible. The Cubs,
Cubs played the Dodgers very well. Milwaukee the last couple of years.
well, they lost Burns, too.
We still only lost 2 games
Nathan
so far.
coming.
I don't know why he wouldn't. I don't know for sure though.
Orioles, he beat them 2 out of 3.
Is the TV on?
Okay.
I think this could be one of the better ones too. These 2 teams in my opinion are really the top 2 teams.
I didn't buy it.
Same here. I thought,
Getting closer.
UConn is the team to beat, but if anybody can do it, it has to be Purdue.
I think we're ready.
Hello and welcome to the Shippensburg Area School District Budget and Finance Update. I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Lentz.
Good evening, everybody. On tonight's agenda,
Here we go.
But you know what? I don't have the.
oh, that's why it's not working. Okay, on tonight's agenda, we're going to review the Community Eligibility Provision Program through food service. Just want to look at the budget timeline and remind the board of some upcoming approvals that are going to be needed, as well as look at a state revenue update, an updated personnel request list, and then the updated 24-25 budget summary. Okay, so for those of you who may be new to the board, or just a refresher, what is the Community Eligibility Provision Program? So it is a food service program that was created through the Healthy Hungry Kids Free Act that allows school districts in high poverty areas to provide breakfast, free breakfast and free lunch to all students. And the reimbursement rates are different compared to the National School Breakfast and National School Lunch program that we currently operate under. And one of the benefits to the CEP program, I'm going to call it from now on, is that it can eliminate the burden of collecting household applications, free and reduced lunch applications. So when looking at this program, previously, one of the things for a school to qualify, they had to have a 40% minimum ISP rate. And so back in October of 2023, the federal government updated that to 25% now. So schools can either have if they have a 25% ISP on their own, or if they're grouped into a group where the aggregate ISP is 25% or above, they can then be part of this program.
Can you just talk about what ISP stands for?
Yeah, so I will get to that on the next, or in the next couple slides. I think it is, I don't want to say it off the top of my head, it's called Identified Student Percentage. So it's part of the calculation to see if districts are eligible to participate in this CEP program. So although you might qualify at 25%, it doesn't mean that it's fiscally viable to operate if one of your schools has an ISP of 25%. It is just the minimum to qualify. So then there's different ways you can look at this. You can look at a school individually, you can group schools together, or you can look at it district-wide. So you don't have to do this program district-wide if it doesn't fiscally make sense. You can actually pick and choose different schools to roll this out in. So some of the benefits, again, all students would receive free breakfast and free lunch. Most of the time, this program will then increase your participation in those programs since they are free. It improves the nutrition for disadvantaged students. It simplifies the meal counting and claiming process here within the district. It eliminates the potential identification of those students who do qualify for free and reduced lunch, reduces paperwork and labor at the school district level, and can possibly eliminate your student bad debt for those students that are either reduced or paid lunches and are unable to pay. So some of the other considerations is that we no longer would collect that individual student eligibility through the free and reduced lunch application, and you'll see in further slides that could possibly have an impact on like different reporting, Title I, PIMS, E-rate. So we do need to take that into consideration when looking into this program. So again, I talked about financial considerations when you receive less than 100%. If your ISP is below 62.5%, you have a possibility there that you won't receive 100% federal reimbursement for this program, which then makes the district kick in a portion of the money. Again, like I said, it increases participation and it provides partnerships between other schools who participate in the CEP program. So again, some of the drawbacks is how we will distribute Title I funds. Currently, Title I funds are distributed based on our free and reduced percentages, so this is something we'll have to dive in deeper if the board is interested in moving to this program, because it could cause a disruption in funds, which schools are ranked highest, so we would definitely need to look at that. It could impact our E-rate. Currently, I believe we get 80% reimbursement through E-rate, so we would have to look at that to make sure that would not be impacted. Also, something we would need to look into with the data PIMS coordinator is that they have to report poverty data through economically disadvantaged students, which is the free and reduced lunch eligibility. So we would have to learn how we would collect that data in lieu of the free and reduced eligibility information that we have to report to PIMS. Some other considerations or drawbacks if we would move to this program. Currently, we have some programs in our district where we either waive or reduce fees based on their free or reduced meal applications. We would have to take a look at how we would do this because we would no longer be collecting these free and reduced lunch applications. If we are below that ISP of 62.5 where there could potentially be a revenue loss, we'd have to subsidize that revenue loss by either the a la carte sales or from non-federal funds. So that would be our general fund. So our food service fund would not be able to pay for any deficits. So this information comes from the state. This is that ISP that I talk about, the identified student percentage. And so the state, as you can see, has identified that all of our schools can participate in CEP because they have an ISP greater than 25%. Again, that doesn't mean it's fiscally sustainable or viable, but they are eligible to qualify. So now this is the calculation. This starts the calculation. So the way you come up with the ISP is you take your number of identified students, and so there is different categories that we look at, that we take into, that the federal government takes into consideration when calculating this. So it takes into account our direct certifications, our students who, or families that apply directly through the state for fiscal assistance. That is considered our direct certification students. Any students that are homeless, if we had any migrant youth, foster children, or Head Start, they would be taken into account in these numbers. So you identify the students that are eligible, well, not eligible, but that this program considers eligible, and then you take your total number of enrolled students in that building, and you come up with your identified student percentage. So you can see them for each school district or each building, and then over to the side, I've grouped a couple buildings together so you can see what some of the groupings may look like. And then to come up with the percentage reimbursement that we would get through the CEP program, that is line D that you see there. And all you take your identified student percentage, line C, by a 1.6 factor. Again, that was determined by the federal government to come up with your percentages. And that's the line where you would want to get close to 100% to be fiscally viable, in which the district is not putting any money into the program. And then the below would be, E would be the paid reimbursement. That's kind of what the district would be subsidizing, because we would only get a very small portion from the federal government to fund the paid reimbursement percentage. So I didn't put these on the slide, but just I'm going to read across line D so you can see that we have increased from last year's numbers. So starting with the senior high, last year was 64.19%. Middle school was 79.05%. The intermediate school was 81.44%. James Byrd was 87.04%. Nancy Grayson was 80.99%. Grace B. Lours was 38.45%. And the district-wide was 75.38%. So you can see in every building, we have increased our direct certs, which then has increased our identified student percentage, which is taken into account when you're considering if districts want to participate in this, if it's financially viable. So what does it look like in terms of numbers? So I showed each of our schools separately, and then I did a couple groupings down below. We could group different ones. I don't even have some of the choices on here, but you could group like James Byrd and Nancy Grayson. I don't have that calculation on here, but we could certainly do that calculation. So as you could see from the previous slide, James Byrd is the closest to the 100% mark. And so in terms of breakfast and lunch, because we would have to offer free breakfast as well as free lunch in this program, you can see the first column is what we would generate through the school breakfast or National School Lunch Program. And then the yellow category is this new CEP program. It's an estimate of what we think we would get in from federal and state reimbursement and what that cost difference would be. So for James Byrd only, if we were to do that school only and roll this out for next year, we're looking at a actual increase in our revenues of $7,386. So this school district looks like it could potentially be fiscally viable to be in this program. If you look at Nancy Grayson, it's actually a loss of approximately $13,000. Intermediate school is a loss of about $2,300. G Blues is a loss of $16,000. Middle school is a loss of approximately $32,000. The high school loss is approximately $50,000. If we did district-wide, it would be a loss of about $106,000. If we grouped all elementaries together, it would be a loss of about $24,500. If we did all elementaries and not G Blues, it would be a loss of about $8,500. If we did all elementaries and the middle school, it would be a loss of about $5,600. And if we did elementaries, no G Blues, and the middle school, it would be a loss of approximately $40,600. Again, we could do some other groupings. Like I said, you could do James Byrd in intermediate school. I didn't run that calculation, but this is just a talking point to get started on what the board feels in terms of potentially operating this program in our district. I will stop there before I roll into more budget numbers, if there's any questions.
You know I had questions, right? So we can sort of break it out by, like, we could do any of these sort of scenarios that you, like, it doesn't have to be district-wide.
That is correct. You can do one school, you can do a group of schools, two schools. You can combine any grouping.
I mean, I think, Dr. Lyon, we could do JB and SACE and still be positive. There's two buildings, I think.
Oh, yeah, because it would offset.
Right.
Just don't know how you can pick one school and not another. And when we're talking
Yeah.
about equity, to say that there's going to be hungry children in
Yeah.
some of the buildings, so I don't know that I would
Yeah.
know we want to be in the green and, not in a deficit or kind of keep it level. I'm really not comfortable with choosing one school or kind of doing an a la carte item when choosing who gets free meals and who doesn't.
Solid argument. One of the other things that I was looking at, all elementaries and, where did it go?
Middle
So if
school.
we did all in elementaries, or elementaries and no G Blues and SACE, we'd also be pretty,
Oh, SACE is included in the elementaries, no G Blues.
oh, is it? Okay.
yeah.
So that's still,
So we would be in the negative at about 8,500 if we did all elementaries except G Blues. So if we are interested in operating this program, we have to apply by June 30th. So there is a little time, to look at this, ask more questions. But we would want to know near the beginning of June, definitely would want board approval so we could have that into the state by June 30th.
how much of a burden is the reporting side of this, where we would have to figure out other ways to collect data about students?
I am not sure. That is one thing we would have to delve in further. I'm sure Dr. Stevens would want to call some school district. I would want to call some school districts that already operate this program and ask those questions. Probably Mrs. DeLong would want to call, and from a Title I perspective, and see what it means.
Yeah.
It is a little concerning if you read the fine print on some of your slides where they're like, we'll get back to you on some pretty important questions, so, finding that out is really important, because we may end up, with just changing one set of problems for another.
Would we be able to kind of do like a pilot for like one of the buildings to see what that reporting looks like before taking that on, district-wide or to a larger capacity?
We can. So with this program, you have the potential to lock in your statistics for 4 years. So if your statistics were really well, let's just say every school district was positive, we would want to lock those in for 4 years in case they would drop. However, you can look at this on an annual basis. So like if you would pilot at James Byrd, next year we could look at it and we could add schools.
So I was also thinking the pilot idea as well, but I didn't want to just do James Byrd. So I felt like kind of a compromise would be the all elementaries except G Blues. And that's not too much
8,500.
too much of a financial hit for us, and we could see what it's like. I mean, if I had my way, I would just say, let's spend the $100,000 and let all the kids in the district eat for free every day. I think that's worth $100,000 in my opinion. I recognize, though, that that's real money, and we have to be careful with our money, but I feel like that's a pretty good investment.
And then the other thing I did want to point out is we just went through a rebid. So when the companies submitted their proposals, they submitted it based on the National School Lunch and the Breakfast Program. So the companies put guarantees in there. Those guarantees would probably not be valid if we moved to the CEP program.
Christy, do you have a balance of what each school's negative balance, like kids that owe money?
I
like
do
that-
not have that with me, but I can certainly get that to the board.
See, like, you know, those negative lunch accounts versus that total 106,000
Whether it's a
versus
wash, yeah.
whether if it would be a wash.
I can certainly get that to the board.
Thank you.
I think if we got that and some feedback from some other districts who have made this, who have adopted this program about some of the other concerns you have about the bean counting, for lack of a better word, that would be useful for us as we're making this decision.
I can tell you, I know Chambersburg, they're not district-wide, but Chambersburg does have a few schools in the CEP program. So that would be one district I would call.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing kind of start to look into this a little bit further and bring some more information back to the board.
That sounds good to me.
Okay. Right, diving into the budget. So just a reminder, we had looked at this budget timeline early on when we had to make a decision whether we were going to stay within the Act 1 resolution or raise taxes above the index and apply for the referendums. The board decided to stick with a resolution and not raise taxes above the index. So then, based on our timeline, in order to get our tax bills out by July 1 and following the Act 1 index, we would like the board to approve a proposed final budget at our April 22nd board meeting. State code, state law says you have to have 30 days in between the approval of your proposed final budget and your final budget adoption, as well as you have to display your proposed final budget for at least 20 days before you adopt your final budget so the public can inspect that budget. So it is on the discussion agenda for tonight, but there is no numbers put in there at this point. We can certainly fill those in with final budget numbers for approval for a proposed final budget on April 22nd. And just a reminder for the board and for new people, new board members on this board, just because you adopt a proposed final budget, it does not mean that you can't make changes between now and the final budget. So whatever you adopt in the proposed doesn't mean it has to stay that when you adopt the final budget. We can make changes between the proposed final and the final budget. So I wanted to recap Governor Shapiro's budget proposal because it's going to be important when we look at some of the information that we've updated in the budget itself. So if you recall, Governor Shapiro had proposed to put $1.1 billion into the BEF formula, and that was divided into two portions. There was $870 million that was proposed to put into the adequacy and equity investment into school districts that qualify for those based on the Basic Education Funding Commissions. And then there was $200 million to be distributed to every school district through the Basic Education Funding formula, as well as $50 million was proposed to be put through the Special Education Funding formula. So you're going to see there that I have highlighted two lines on the governor's proposal: the $200 million to be distributed through the Basic Education Funding formula and the $50 million proposed to be put through the Special Education Funding formula. Superintendent August and I had the ability to attend an all-day seminar on April 3rd that was done by PASA and PASBO. And at that seminar, PASBO was very confident in saying that they believe that the state legislature will put $200 million in the Basic Education Funding formula and $50 million into the Special Education Funding formula. They also felt pretty confident that the legislature is also willing to reset our Basic Education formula base to what it is in 23-24 fiscal year, which for us, it's currently estimated at $13,355,410. However, they did say for the $872 million that the caucuses down there are far apart. So at this point, they did not recommend putting any money in for that. but they believe that there probably will be something more, but they don't know what it will be and how it will be distributed. So, what does that look like for Shippensburg? So PASBO has created an estimator tool, which I have shown this before. And so, again, this is just an estimate. It's just a tool to kind of say, if the state put 200 million into the basic education funding formula, what could that potentially look like for Shippensburg School District? Keep in mind that there are, like I've shared before, there are tons of factors that go into this basic education funding formula. And some of those factors have not been updated and will not be updated until May of 2024. So that's why it shows an estimate, because we're almost a year in the rears till we know what we're going to get in the current school year, let alone project for the next fiscal year. The funding formula is also based on what the other 499 district factors are doing as well. And of course, we can't guess what they're doing. But best guess estimate based on this tool shows if there was 200 million put into the basic education funding formula, that the district would get an additional $353,979 in basic education money. Doing the same thing for the special education funding formula, if they put 50 million into it, Shippensburg's share would be an additional $89,734.
And just to pontificate a little bit on the special ed side of things, that number's been, I think, pretty consistent. It has not grown over the years. One of the information that we saw at that conference was how static that number has been from the state. As we all know, special education costs have been one of the drivers of a lot of fiscal heartache for districts. So I would say 50 million is a good start from the state, but you know it's really lagging behind the reality that districts are facing.
I didn't have time, but I could certainly throw that into the next budget presentation, that slide that PASBO shared, that it shows how the state funding is way behind what our special ed costs are statewide.
Just picture the same number repeated over like 10 years. So.
And then write to your legislature about it.
So previously, the top part of the chart was things that we were looking at when we were putting the budget together, the preliminary budget together. We looked at different scenarios, as in 30% of the governor's budget, 60%, and 100%. So that's the top chart. You've seen that before. So then what the bottom chart is doing is it's showing, okay, if we got 100% of the governor's proposal, that'd be about 2.8 million. Based on PASBO's guidance, we've now updated the budget to include the 200 million, as well as the 50 million in the special education funding formula. So we're saying we believe we're guaranteed approximately 443,713 from the state for next fiscal year. We still wanted to potentially consider additional monies from the state. So down below then is if we would get 30% of that adequacy and equity investment, that 871 million, what would that be? And then you can see what 60% would be. To be on the conservative side, we built in 30% of that, which would be an additional 562,000. So the 443,000 plus the 562,000, we have built into the proposed final budget 1,570,000. Let me try that again. 1,505. Okay, try this again. 1,570,000. 5,763 into the budget, which is a difference of about 681,000 from what we were originally put in the budget. So it's actually a reduction to what we had been showing previously. If we would have put 60% in, and then these kind of what we believe will be guaranteed funding from the state, it would have been a shortfall of about 119,000. Again, at the PASBO 7 seminar, I shared this with you before in the past. The Independent Fiscal Office at the state continues to believe that our AC1 index is going to fall in the future. So on the left-hand side, it's showing the history of the AC1 index, and on the right-hand side, it's showing the forecast of the AC1 index. So again, we right now have a really high base index, but it is to fall in the future, which will let us generate less real estate tax revenue in the future. So moving on to the personnel list, we have revised this since we have showed this to you last time. We have made some adjustments to it. So the first part of the chart, you can see there is 15 positions listed there with a subtotal. We have removed the assistant business administrator position. We have added a second grade teaching position, an elementary specialist, and a classroom assistant. So that brings the subtotal of new positions to about 1.3 million, or a decrease from the last time we presented of about 170,000. We also feel that the positions that you see 16 through 20 are also very critical positions, but since we do not know what the state is doing at this time, we felt that maybe we should wait and see what we truly get from the state. And if we are awarded more than we anticipated, then come back and consider adding these positions to the budget as well. So you can see that those additional positions are about 324,000, or a grand total of 1.6 million. But at this point, we have placed the first set of positions into this proposed final budget of 1.3 million.
And Board, I would just say, we've prioritized these numerous times, looked them over, based on our enrollment, based on our, requirements for special ed positions, growing populations. These are what we feel we need to be able to deliver on our mission.
So that brings us to our updated budget summary for next fiscal year. So looking at revenues, if we were not to increase taxes at all, you can see that that would generate about $64 million. If we increase taxes to the index, that would generate about $67 million. Currently, our expenses are sitting at $71.4 million, or almost $71.5 million. You can see over to the left-hand side, I've noted the reduction in the revised personnel list, as well as, if you recall last time, this is already in this number, but just to recall that we are looking at some personnel attrition that is saving the budget about $431,000, and then we had to update the budget to include $35,000 for our tuition that we pay to G Blues, or to the university for the G Blue school. The affiliation agreement says that we give a portion of our BEF, our basic education funding, to the university for the G Blues. And of course, as our basic education funding is going up, the amount that we would give Shippensburg University would also go up. So we had to put additional money in that line. So then you can see the surplus and deficit on the gray line. That would be, when you look at the right-hand side, if we would increase taxes to the index with the revenues that we reviewed this evening, we would be at a deficit of about 4.4 million. Again, no new state money, and no, that would going taxes to the index. If we would not raise taxes to the index and no new state money, we're looking at a deficit of about 7.4 million. Then the peach line that you see there, that's what we have built into the proposed final budget. We've built in 200 million of the BEF, 50 million of the SEF, and a prorated 30% of that adequacy and equity investment from the state. So if we raise taxes to the index, we're looking at a deficit of about 3.4 million. If we don't raise taxes at all, we're looking at a deficit of about 6.4 million. If we would do the same thing but put 60% of that adequacy investment in from the governor's budget proposal, increasing taxes to the index, we would be at a deficit of about 2.9 million. No tax increase at all, we would be at a deficit of about 5.8 million. And then if we put in 100% of the governor's proposal going to the index, we would be at about a deficit of 1.6 million. No tax increase would be at 4.6 million. So I wanted to put on this slide because this is a pretty hefty deficit we're looking at, but there were some significant budget cost drivers that hit our budget this year. One of those was our medical cost increases. Unfortunately, I went to the final renewal rate setting with our consortium for our medical cost. and our medical cost increase is not changing. It is staying at the 16.24% increase. So that has been the largest increase we've seen in our medical. Again, that is out of our control. As I explained during the COVID years, these providers had locked in agreements with these doctors. Now these contracts are coming up and they're having to renegotiate higher cost contractors with the doctors. So it's not just us, it's districts statewide that are seeing these large medical increases. So that was about $885,000 increase. We also saw a significant increase in our outside charter school enrollments this year. So we needed to put that in next year's budget of about $1.5 million. We're also losing our ESSER funding money through the state, where we funded 7.5 positions of like permanent positions out of that. So there's about an additional $1 million. All said and done, that's $3.5 million. So if we would have raised taxes to the index, we would not be sitting at a deficit at this moment if these big increases wouldn't have hit our budget.
So again, costs outside of our control largely equal essentially the budget gap that we might be looking at.
Correct. And then we can continue to go, as we are one of the probably few school districts in the state that are seeing increased student enrollment. We're needing to add additional personnel in our regular education programs. So our like second grade teachers, our first grade teachers, the elementary specialist. We're also having to add special education teachers because of the increase in special education students. We're seeing an increase in our English as a second language students, so we're needing to add teachers there. We're seeing an increased cost in our transportation. I don't have numbers to some of these other things, but I wanted to point out our PSERS employer contribution rate remains high, higher than it had been in the past. Of course, we face personnel wage increases every year. We did a substantial increase for our support staff. We reopened that CBA. There's been other department budget increases, as well as on this next slide is keep in mind when we don't increase real estate taxes, that has a bearing on future budgets as well. So some of those other factors that I could quickly put numbers to, that's an additional 1.3 million or a grand total of 4.8 million that has caused this budget
And
deficit.
again, that's the piece that is about us being able to deliver our mission for students. This isn't like frivolous. This isn't, going above and beyond. This is, meeting the needs of our kids, that show up every day.
So the last line on that slide, I had said about no real estate tax increases. So what this next slide shows is during COVID, there were no tax increases for 2 fiscal years. And of course, as we talked about, that compounds. So what this chart shows is the compound effect of the revenue loss as well as our expenditure increases over that same time period. So from 2019 to 2023, you can see that those revenue losses accumulated about 6.1 million in revenue loss. Our expenditures over that same amount of time increased by about 18.6 million. So if taxes had been raised to the index, it would have covered a third of our expenditure increases. So again, also contributing towards that budget deficit or gap that we are currently experiencing.
And I asked, Mrs. Lentz to put this slide in just because, those 2 years are pivotal to tell the story of where we are and what's on these sheets. In addition, that back-to-back year compounded with that, I'm sure decision that made sense in the moment to move those positions to ESSERS, has driven this. This is just the impact of those 2 years on our budget over time. And that blue line is just going to get bigger and bigger as we roll. So, just important context to remember, as we work our way through this budget process.
So that brings us to, I think, next to our last slide. So this is what we are recommending as our proposed final budget for the board to adopt and us to be able to display, and then we can continue to have conversations on what we want in the final budget. So that would be putting in revenues, increasing taxes to the index, that would give us about 67 million in total revenues, as well as adding in those state revenues that we just talked about, which would add additional about $1 million for a total of about 68 million in revenues. And then our total expenditures are currently at about 71.4 million. And then that brings our deficit to about a 3.4 million. And so you're wondering how we're going to cover that. Well, part of it, we had already set money aside in committed fund balance to slowly absorb in our seventh grade teaching positions. So the 23-24 was the first year we dipped into the fund balance to help pay for those. We paid for 4 of the 4 teachers out of that year. This year, we would pay for 3 of the 4 teachers out and absorb 1 into the general fund budget. So we're using 300,000 of that for our seventh grade teaching positions. It would leave 300,000 for future fiscal years to be able to help fund that in slowly. We also are recommending using the committed fund balance for PSERS. Even though PSERS may go up in the future and it remains high, it's not jumping in leaps and bounds like it has in the past. So we would recommend funding the deficit using our PSERS, and then of 1.7 million, and that would wipe our committed fund balance for PSERS to 0. Then also using our unassigned fund balance, using a million of that, which would leave about 394,000 in our unassigned fund balance, and then using approximately 406,000 of our assigned fund balance for future capital projects debt repay to cover the projected deficit. Just keep in mind, we are getting ready to go out to another bond borrow, and this could potentially have an impact on our bond rating. The bond rating companies do not like to see deficits, especially reoccurring deficits, being covered by fund balance. But again, I can't tell you what that would do. I can just tell you it may have an impact on our future bond ratings. So that brings us to the closing remarks. I will open up for questions, but before I do, again, we'd like to put the proposed final budget on for board approval at the April 22nd meeting. Again, you can make changes between now and the final budget that is to be adopted in June. Our next Budget and Finance Committee meeting is slated for May 13th at 6 p.m., and I will open up if there's any board questions or discussion.
I think you had it in a previous presentation about the PSERS rate. It's come down.
Slightly, very slightly, from 34%, I think it's 33.9%.
It was much higher than that. Is that correct, or is it just gradually coming down very, very slowly?
No, it's actually supposed to creep back up.
Okay,
Projections say it's going to creep back up.
sorry. And just so everyone understands, that's the money that we are required to pay to cover our employees' retirement benefits, correct?
Is correct.
And it went up so high because the state mismanaged
Mismanaged.
those funds during the recession and decided to shunt all of that mismanagement onto local school districts to
Right.
make us pay the extras because they lost so much money.
It's what we like to talk about, the mandated, or like unfunded mandates.
Yeah, okay. Because that rate was low prior to the recession, right?
Correct. When I started in school business, it was like around 4%, and then jumped to 8, and then 12, and then 16, and then, I don't know, 20, and yeah, it just kept climbing.
Okay, but so, yeah, I guess I'm whining about PSERS, but I think it's worth reminding the public that we're having to pick up the pieces for what the state mismanaged. But in the future, we'll just have, if we're gonna sort of spend all of our PSERS fund balance, we're just gonna have to be more, we
We'll
have to make sure
absorb
that's
that.
able to be absorbed in the yearly budget.
Correct. Yes.
That was that in there because we saw the rates jumping around so much?
Yes. Well, that was before me. The board and the school district saw that these big rate increases were coming, so they put money back aside, and they chipped away at it, and luckily they had plenty in there to be able to cover these rate hikes and then some, obviously. So, because they weren't sure what it would be, they just put money back to help cover that. So we were fortunate to have enough to cover those major increases, like the 4% jumps each year. And then just remember, like back to the PSERS, cyber charter schools. I mean, that's out of our control. The way the state has that funded, we pay for that. So there's nothing we can do. Another mandate.
Right. Just for me and for maybe others, can you just review what the Act 1 index is?
Okay, so the Act 1 index is how the state determines we can raise taxes. So what they do is each year they look at the Act 1 index and they set the base index. And school districts that have a market value aid ratio above 50% can get an adjusted Act 1 index. So Shippensburg has always had adjusted Act 1 index. But that drives out how much we can increase our millage rate each year. So right now, our base index plus the adjustment is 7.1%. So it is going to fall in the future, which means we will be able to generate less real estate tax revenue money in the future because that percentage is going to fall on what we can adjust our millage rates to.
And just a reminder, I think Dr. Goetz pointed this out last time. This drives not our whole budget. It's not 6% of our entire budget. It is 6% of the local effort of our budget. So, it's definitely, the one lever that the board has as a whole to increase revenues.
It's kind of the only lever.
Right.
Everything else is out of our control when it comes to raising money.
Correct. I mean, the other side is decisions on the
Right.
other side.
It is another way to say this is the Act 1 index is the limit that the state sets on us as to how high we can raise taxes
That is correct.
Without putting like out a referendum.
without doing a referendum, yeah.
Which we're limited in what referendums we can do. Sometimes we qualify for them, sometimes we don't. Like there's the special education, the retirement. So not every year we've been able to qualify for, say, like the retirement.
It is kind of ironic that the group that gives unfunded mandates to another level of government also puts caps on that level's ability to raise revenues. So when you say it out loud, it doesn't, it's not great.
Doesn't help saying it out loud.
Right.
Christy, I know you track the numbers, and that's your job. I learned in my other job that we had to rely on the financial office because that's their area of expertise. Is there anything we're doing? I know you spew these numbers up. Is there anything we're doing that we shouldn't be doing, or anything we can do better to guard against the deficit spending? As most of us look at this and get some of it, you do pretty well, but it's not easy stuff to comprehend. You're the one with the numbers, and I like to hear what you have to say, if anything.
Can I guess?
Go ahead. I'm thinking because most of this stuff is needed. Go ahead.
Well, I do think, the Esser's positions and that those were not incorporated into the regular budget 4 or 5 years ago. That put us in a little bit of a burden now, and we're trying to recover from that. But I think we have a plan to recover from that. But that was unfortunate.
And then, keep in mind, I've presented in the past that we have not fully borrowed our debt, maintaining our debt. So, that's something that we can look at. Not that we don't need to make adjustments to our buildings, but we have not fully borrowed all that. So do we wait to see what the state comes out, to see how much more borrowing we do? I mean, there's things that we can kind of take a step back on until we see what the state does with this fair funding lawsuit.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm concerned about is moving forward. We're dealing with an awful lot of monies we may be borrowing on or doing whatever. Don't want to get in a pinch. If you see anything coming, the best of your knowledge, we need a good guess or ideal on that.
I think
Are we seeing any revenue from like the new rudders being built and like some of like one of the buildings being built out in the Cleversburg area? So as far as like growth?
So that's not shown in these numbers right now because they're not on our books. They won't be on our books till they're fully completed. I can certainly, I'm not sure the other one you're referring to. I could certainly look up, which I've been wanting to do, just haven't had a chance. Like what does some of the like sheets in the current rudders bring on to know that that will be added to our real estate tax revenue. But we're still not talking about millions of dollars. What brings in millions of dollars is your big warehouses each year.
I mean it
would
has to be
it would be a help.
it has to be, to your point, Mike. I think it has to be a really tight budget if if you are willing to cut the position for your assistant. So we are pinching pennies if the bean counter is willing to cut her assistant's position. So I have confidence that Christy and superintendent are doing everything they can to squeeze as much blood out of this turnip as we
Who
can.
decided that? Was that you and who else?
So we reviewed it, and then looking at the elementary enrollments, Mr. Carey, and looking at the numbers that were projected to be in classrooms, it comes down to making some tough calls. And you know, so I think the adage "protect the classroom first" is something that circulates in budget superintendent's budget discussions. So that was a decision that I had to make and run by Christy. It's really not it's a matter of we need both of those. Which one can we survive longer without? And it's a tough call, but that's the call that I put forth, because otherwise we're looking at 28 kids in a classroom to start the year. At one of the buildings, and that's been a priority for the board to keep those class sizes as reasonable as possible. So.
Okay, so you talked about the Rudders building. It's not a lot. I'll tell you the other one. So the CCA building that's getting built isn't going to bring a tremendous amount of revenue to our tax base. However, it could take a lot of our money toward outside cost getting in. And that is something we absolutely can't control.
I would say that's probably not great news for us.
Yeah.
And that increase may be already a reflection of that, but hopefully that's maybe anticipation of that. But definitely, that relationship is one-sided in terms of benefits, at least in my opinion.
So is there any concern moving forward with the proposed final budget and putting those numbers in for budget approval at the April 22nd meeting?
Just one more thing, and this never makes sense to me, but I've done this 3 times now, is that the timelines of this, it just makes no sense to me, that we are trying to approve our budget based off the guess of whatever they're going to decide in Harrisburg. So we are completely beholden to everything, and yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me at all, but I think that's just kind of how government works sometimes.
I would agree 100% that none of that makes sense, that our budget is on a strict timeline, and like 30% of our budget is unknown. And from our conference, it didn't sound like the starting points between the parties were very close. There is some hope. The state does have a significant kind of rainy day fund that has accumulated that could be pushed out, but they have the same concerns over sustainability of that. And also the funding formula has not quite been resolved to anyone's satisfaction yet. So I wouldn't necessarily bank on those things. Because it was a little discouraging, that our numbers because of different factors that are outside of our control, which seem to be a little bit strange to me. Doesn't necessarily look like our ADM is going to necessarily like skyrocket, even though our numbers continue to inch forward.
At your magical conference that you went to, did you get any sense of movement on the cyber charter funding
Oh, we forgot to
reform?
say, they actually said it was dead on arrival.
Okay.
So that proposed, I guess, what Governor Shapiro had proposed. So whether something else new comes about, they weren't confident in that.
Because if they fixed, if my math is right from remembering from previous presentations, if the state were to fix basic education funding formula and reform the cyber charter funding, that would be close to about $2 million for our district.
That is correct.
So those of you getting ready to write your state representatives, you need to remember that it is costing our district $2 million for this upcoming fiscal year because the state is failing to move on basic education formula and cyber charter school reform. Those are
One thing that just flashed in my mind that is a positive is, as I said in my update, we have some eligibility to get some grants. The state has put out some school facility grant monies, I think, in lieu of what used to be known as PlanCon, which was guaranteed money and a formula that you could count on. This is a competitive grant. We have $1.2 million in the budget to address the Jamesburg roof. This could potentially, if we get the amount that we hope to get, take about $500,000, give or take, out of our budget towards the good, because it's money we've already budgeted, because that roof is going to, it's flashing red. It needs to be taken care of. We are confident that we will get something in that process. Our ask is pretty reasonable, and so I'm hopeful, even though hope is not a strategy, that we get close to $500,000 that would help reduce that number.
So this will give some flashbacks to some of us, and I don't know if you know this, Christine, I haven't looked for a while. I feel like it's probably always changing, but like our average spending per pupil, I remember we used to be like way, way, way at the bottom, right?
Right. We probably still are. I can pull that information for the next budget meeting.
Yeah. Like as our enrollment numbers like through the years go up, and I just remember Mr. Burt always used to say we were, like if we were to be even with our spending per student to a lot of similar districts around here, like we would have to add like millions of dollars.
Millions of dollars, yeah.
I think you did share in the last one a chart that showed us third from the bottom in Cumberland County, and I think
That was our millage rate,
Oh,
but
okay.
I can bring that back. I can update it and bring that back at the next meeting.
I think that's a good testament to talk about the doing what we need to do, and still trying to provide as many awesome experiences as possible.
Yeah, I'll say one more thing. So I would love tax increases more than anybody else, but at the end of the day, like this impacts our kids, like directly. No matter what you think about tax increases, like to me, this is our next generation of kids who are going to be leaders in our community or around the state or wherever. So while I hope that they figure out a way to fix a lot of the issues that are going on that are outside of our control, I'm
So, just to echo what Mr. Kressler said, no one likes a tax increase, but maybe just reframe it. Think of it as an investment. And if you had a chunk of money, your taxes, that you wanted to invest in something, investing in public schools and kids is a really good thing to invest in. So it's a terrible thing to have to do, but it's a really good place to invest your dollars.
Agreed, and I would just maybe, if it helps, You know, if you take the 2 years of 0 tax increases and you average them with the last 2 years, that increase is not as scary. You know, so that is something to consider as well. You know, over time, you know, there's been some benefits to the taxpayers coming out of 19 through 21. You know, and that is, you know, certainly, you know, driven some of our issues.
We're out of time. I want to make sure we thank Christy for doing all of this because I don't pretend to understand any of it, and I just love having someone we can trust who does such a good job. So thank you, Christy.
Good job, Chris.
Christy. All right, moving on to the committee of the whole. First up, we will have Dr. Donat with her ELL programming review.
So the board, you may remember a few meetings back, requested information about our English language learner program. You know, just basically how it runs, you know, numbers, and basically, you know, how we are addressing that growing population. Hang on just a second, Dr. Nutt. Looks like we need a little TV help.
Yeah, I had to unplug it so I could.
Oh, okay.
the-
Gotcha.
Did you share it with me on Google or? No, PowerPoint, okay.
Not in Google.
Troy, how do I get to my email on this computer? She emailed me a PowerPoint presentation. On the bottom, okay. That was myself? This is me, yeah.
Use the new tab into your it's outlook.com.
Set the ad ship.
I need to do the Jeopardy thing.
I feel like we may have to go through it a couple times.
So,
Thank you, Mrs. DeLong, for handling all of that. So what I wanted to open with today is go to the next slide, is to give you a quick little insight into what the classroom looks like to an ELL student, an English language learner student. Go ahead and hit play.
Oh, sorry.
We have testing all week this week and next week. The tests are going to be hard, but that's all right because we're going to try really hard. Isn't that right, Cameron?
Yes, Ms. Peters.
Okay, great. Everyone listen up. So we're going to want to work on we get ours from the answer and the information in the story, okay? We're going to go ahead and test, factual test, and try this actus test. Oh, test, your open up. So we're going to page, you go to B. First on page 3.
¿Qué dijo? ¿A poco va a empezar el examen? No, es una práctica.
We're gonna take notes from the story and we're gonna turn it into a math problem and we're gonna walk through it together, okay? So the boy ran 3 blocks. So everyone write 3 blocks. How long did it take him to run 3 blocks? Michelle?
6 minutes.
Very good, 6 minutes. All right, so then we're gonna take 3 blocks and 6 minutes,
¿Por qué el
right?
niño corre con los bloques? ¿Qué? Sí, ¿por qué el niño corre con los bloques? No,
Okay, so the
corre 3
question I'm
calles.
gonna go on to ask us, how long will it take him to run 20 blocks? What do we do? How many minutes is that per block?
8 minutes.
Try and remember to raise your hand if you wanna answer, okay? No, it's not 8 minutes. Michelle?
18 minutes.
Nope, not 18 minutes. Yes, Enrique?
40?
40, yeah, very good. How'd you get 40?
I don't know.
You don't know? Well, 40 is the right answer. How did you get it?
I forgot.
You forgot. Okay. Does anyone know how we get 40? Yes, Moises. Yep, that's right. Very good. Great. Can you tell us how you got that?
40?
Yep, very good. But can you explain to the
You can
class what you
stop it
did here,
there.
how you got that?
So, just a quick little video that kind of shows you what it's like for somebody who is new to the English language trying to make sense of what is happening in a classroom. And you can see there that there's lots of things we can do and that teacher did to try to support that child. And what this presentation is going to walk you through is some of the things that our district is already doing and some of the ways in which we're training people to work with English language learners. Go ahead, Leslie. Maybe. So the first step is to identify who these students are. So how do we identify these students? This happens typically 2 ways. The first is when they come to register or as a new student. Our registrar administers a 3-question family survey that asks them questions like, what is the language spoken in the home? What's the first language that the child learned? And there's a third language or a third question on there as well. But it's really trying to understand who this child is that's coming to us, because we don't always have great records when kids are coming into the district. Depending on the results of that family survey, we also administer the WIDA screener, and that's a language test. And that test gives our ELL teachers their first indication of how proficient of an English speaker the student is. Scores that are less than a 4.5 means that they qualify for English language support, and that's how we find out who these students are, and that's how we administer or decide how much support they're going to get. It's based off of this WIDA score. Next slide. So if they have no English language, they're going to get 2 to 3 hours of intense, direct English instruction per week, and you can see the rest of the information up there depending on where they're at as a learner. So they might get anywhere from 3 hours a week to simply an hour a week. Go ahead to the next slide. So our English language teachers, they are screening the students, and then they are either pulling the students out of a regular classroom in to receive specialized instruction, and that could be individual or it could be in a small group setting, or they are pushing in. They're going into the regular education classroom, and they're helping the student make sense of what's going on in the regular classroom. Our English language teachers are also supporting our content teachers. They're helping them understand ways to provide accommodations for these students. So for example, if you have a student who's not yet proficient, giving them a multiple choice test that has 5 answers might be too overwhelming because it takes them too long to translate those 5 different options. So maybe for that student, their test would only have multiple choice with 3 options instead of 5. Or they might have more time to take the test because of the amount of language skill, the translation time that it takes for them to make sense of that test. Go ahead, Leslie. Oh, and I meant to say, sorry, the other thing that was on that list was providing a list of can-do options. Our English, our ELD teachers, they have the ability, they have lists of what those students are capable of accomplishing based off of their current language skill. So maybe they can answer in complete sentences. That information is provided to the classroom teacher versus maybe they can only do 2 or 3 word sentences in response or no response yet. So possible accommodations, there's a whole list of them up there to let you have an idea of what our teachers are doing to support these students in their classroom. This is what regular education teachers are doing. This is also what our English ELD teachers are doing. Go ahead to the next one. And it is important to note that all of our teachers are responsible for delivering English language learning. That's a super important concept. It's not just relegated to our specialists. We are all responsible by the state to help bring these students up to proficient language levels, which is a daunting task for some of our teachers that don't have a background in working with English language learners. Go ahead, Leslie. So one of the questions we get often is, why can't we just use Google Translate? You know, Google Translate's, it's an amazing tool, it's awesome technology. Why can't we just use Google Translate? It is an awesome tool, but it doesn't necessarily cover all dialects of all languages, and some languages, their dialects are so different that it actually can sound like a very different language to the student. Another reason why is that if we overuse Google Translate, we're not giving the students the ability to learn English for themselves. We're just giving them a crutch and we're not giving them the actual skills that they need. So yes, there are times when we encourage teachers and students to be using Google Translate, but it's not the primary goal and it's not the primary tool. Next one. So some of you might be wondering, how long of a time does it take to learn a second language? And if you've ever tried to learn a second language yourself, you know it's very challenging. So the hardest, most stressful time period is what they call pre-production. That lasts anywhere from a day to 6 months. It's when you have a vocabulary of less than 500 words. And it's extremely frustrating for people because they don't have the ability to express themselves. Imagine being in a room, needing to go to the bathroom, and not knowing the right words to express that need. So that's one of the things we try to keep in mind is when students are new to a language, it's when they personally are experiencing the most amount of stress. You can see the rest of the phases up there. I won't read that slide to you. But it's important to keep in mind that the timing varies for all students. Just like some of us are more proficient at learning math quickly, some people are really proficient at learning languages. And the younger you are, the faster you can develop a second language skill. Okay, next one. So when do our students exit this program? When they're active, they have that WIDA score, that screener score test of less than 4.5. Once they get 4.5 or higher on that screener test, and they've completed some inventories both with the English language teacher and with the regular classroom teacher, once they've gotten a score that's above 10.5, then they're moved to a monitor status. And a monitor status, we monitor students for 4 years. 2 of those years, the English language teacher continues to check in 4 times a year on that student. And then the other 2, we just keep track of where they are to make sure that they're not falling off the grid. We want to make sure that if they need more services, we're still there for them. So that's the exit system. Go ahead, Leslie. Current numbers, I broke our current numbers down by building for you and also by active, those that are currently receiving direct instruction with our English language delivery teachers, and those that are in the monitoring phase. So you can see that we've broken the 200 student barrier this past week, and there are still more in the queue. Go ahead to the next one. When you wanted to know about the caseloads per teachers, we have 5 teachers, 3 of which are full-time district employees, 1 of which is a full-time IU employee, and 1 is an IU part-time. She's only here 2 days a week. And you can see the number of students each of those have, both in the active and then in the monitoring and then their total caseload. And that is very high numbers. Next. And if you're curious about what languages we're representing, over 116 students are speaking Nepalese, and then 64 Spanish students is the next higher. I just put this up because I thought it might be of interest to you of where students are coming. All right, and I think that's everything. Do you have questions for me?
I would just point out 2 things before we get to questions. One, that from the video, that the spectrum of students you saw there, some were bilingual, some can function, some are completely not able to communicate in English. So there's a wide gambit of kids that may be in each classroom with a lot of different needs. The other part, which yeah, I guess there's kind of a theme here of things that the state requires, is those students who doesn't speak English will at some point be required to take a standardized test that will count, towards our district performance. So can't say that makes a ton of sense to me, but that is the way it is.
Yeah, and with the PSSAs, we can translate the directions for them for all of the tests, but we cannot translate the English language arts test for them beyond the directions.
I just let that sink in for just a second.
I just want to say, wow, our teachers, for one, we always knew they were amazing, but super dynamic at what they do.
Yes.
One thing that Michael and I, or Dr. Lyman, had heard when we were at the Franklin County Career and Tech School was that there is a newcomer learning academy in Bethel and in Allentown, where the home districts send their students there. Have we had the opportunity to visit these English language learner schools to see what that looks like, knowing that our numbers are high for the caseload, what their curriculum looks like?
We've not had that opportunity yet. It is on my list.
All right, thanks.
And just as a follow-up, there is the local consortium, Cumberland County does have a newcomer academy. It's housed at Northern High School. I believe it's for high school students. We would have the opportunity to purchase slots like we would at another outside organization to get our kids there. For us, geography is not our friend. So that's a lot of time on a van or a bus to get there and back. So we've kind of discussed a little bit whether that makes sense for our students, and the fact that we would only be able to send a small number, relative to the population that we might have.
Are the services that were described at the beginning of your presentation, those are K through 12?
Yes.
Right, so if I'm a junior in high school and I show up, okay. And then, can you go to the stages thing? So, where on there does a student feel pretty comfortable in school?
Typically, that's going to happen around the intermediate fluency stage when they are able to fully understand directions, when they're able to have conversations with their friends, when they're starting to be able to grasp some of the idioms that exist. Once they get to the advanced fluency is when they'll feel like a native speaker.
So, any new child who comes in this, we're looking at, depending on age and lots of other variables like you talked about, we're looking at 2 years of them really playing catch up before they feel comfortable in the learning environment.
Yeah, we count on 2 to 4 years.
Okay. And then we have 5-ish ELL staff, right? Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of work for 5 people. And I assume this population is growing.
Correct. We continue to register additional students who are learning English.
Just a reminder from the budget presentation, that chart is why there are 2 ESL teachers in the budget. Because the capacity is getting to the point where, we're already paying the IU for 4 and 5, and we may need these 2 and still to contract with the IU to be able to provide these services. And just to reiterate, these aren't optional services. These aren't, hey, this is really nice that we're doing this for these students. These are required services. So it's not a choice or something that we can just choose not to do. It is, it's in the school code that we have to supply services to these students, and we should. So.
And I would also add, when we're talking about Google Translate, we are not allowed to send any official information from the school home to parents via Google Translate. We do need to have things officially translated by a qualified translator. And that does also bring costs to the district because we have to get that translator to travel to us, pay them for the time that they're here, and we have the option of doing something called a language line through the IU, which is a great service, but it also adds charge to us for every minute. I forget what the minute rate is right now, but we're currently $2,000 over our budget at this point in time in the academic year, and it will continue. We still have a marking period yet to go, so it's going to continue to rise in cost.
And just more context before we move on, I think it was 5 years ago, we had 45 students. Okay, just remembering back to give some context to how the growth has occurred over a short period of time.
Okay. One last question. So when we look at the numbers, we're like, 1 to 45, that looks a lot, or total 1 to 54, or 1 to 70. What is like the recommended student to teacher ratio when it comes to the caseload for ESL?
I would have to look into that for you, but I think there's going to be a lot of variables, including what the grade level is and what their language level currently is. Because a student who is more proficient needs less direct hands-on time. They could be practicing skills. Somebody who is brand new is going to need more intensive time, and it also depends on the composition of the classroom. If you have a classroom where half the kids are speaking Spanish and the other half are speaking Russian, it's a lot easier to manage than a classroom where there's 6 or 7 different languages all in that same classroom and you're trying to provide support for all of them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Dunn. Next up, again, kind of from a board discussion request. There's a discussion item that Mr. Scott brought up last meeting about moving forward with lights, pursuing the requirements and approvals and financial sides of lights to be added to the stadium project. And so in order to kind of give some context to that, it seems like a simple question, but it is actually the opposite. I've asked Dave Jones from Stock and Leader, who deals with our facilities questions, to kind of run through for the board what the reality of this would look like and the steps for us to move forward should the board choose to do so. Thanks, Dave.
Hi, everybody. So I don't have fancy PowerPoint. I have old-fashioned paper, so I'm just going to pass them out.
Thank you.
I'll take one and pass. Sorry, thanks.
You're like a teacher, Dave.
All right, everyone. So Dr. August had called me about this question, and well, there's two components to this. One is what the borough is going to make us do to get through this process to add lights to the stadium, and the second is kind of what the practical impact is. So what I've handed you guys is a copy of Part E of the development agreement, and this sets forth the conditions under which we can move forward with lights at the stadium. So these are the conditions that the board put on or the Borough Council put on the approval for the stadium project. And it starts with, we can't use it at night, the stadium at night, whether we have lights or not. And then it goes on to state that the stadium lighting facilities shall not be installed unless until a future land development plan is included and we do a traffic study in accordance with the SAUDO. It also says that we will be required to demonstrate that sufficient parking is available for the stadium use pursuant to the zoning ordinance. And then it specifically states that no JV or varsity games to be played with or without lights in the stadium until the improvements required by the stadium light plan are complete. So they kind of really circumscribe what we can do with the stadium with regard to the lights being in or not being in. So it's one thing to ask to get the cost of what it costs to install the lights. The problem is the borough wants us to do a parking study and a traffic impact study, which could turn into additional parking spaces, which then turns into, as Mr. Noggle knows, additional stormwater work, excavation, so on and so forth. So it's a little bit hard to kind of come up with a number right now or get you a good estimate of what those costs may be to actually do the improvements until we do the studies that are associated with this agreement and with this plan approval. So that being said, the other component to this is how that impacts schedule. So I would think that really what we need to do is go through another football season to kind of do those traffic counts, look at how many, and I know we know this, how many people park down at the stadium in Memorial Park, but we're going to have to do those counts again and formally present those to the Borough Council as a part of a further land development plan to do this work. So it's a little bit of chicken and egg. We may want to do the lights, but we don't know what we have to do to get the lights in. So it's a little frustrating at this point to try to do that, but in order to get the current project moved forward, these are our limitations. So I don't know if that's, Dr. August, if that's where you wanted me to go, or if you want me to go any further or talk about anything.
So Dave, can you kind of paint a picture? So let's say the board says we want to move forward. Like, what would the steps of that process be?
Yeah. I think it would be to start, it'd be to authorize K&W as your engineer to start working on getting traffic counts and then doing parking studies for the JV and varsity football games in this upcoming season, and in particular homecoming. And if you have a more attended game, typically homecoming is our bellwether as to what the greatest parking needs are during that time frame. And then we could work forward with that to develop the plan of what we would have to do, develop the traffic and the parking improvements that we would need to do at the stadium. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to have to do additional parking requirements at the stadium. We have to prove what our parking requirements are, and the hope is once we do the traffic counts and the parking study during the football season with an eye on knowing that that's what we want to do at the new stadium, we're going to be able to justify that we do not need additional parking requirements at the stadium based on our current design. Can I guarantee that? Absolutely not. We have to go to Borough Council, and as you know, Shippensburg Borough has a very difficult parking requirement in their zoning ordinance that makes us go through a variance request and a conditional use each and every time we do a parking lot.
So Dave, just a point for clarification, the current stadium meets the 5-to-1 ratio for seating.
It does.
Parking.
It does.
Okay, so if that stadium were filled, every seat that we were proposing to build, our parking at that site would meet the requirement.
That's correct. It's the problem is if the zoning officer says, well, what happens if you're running parent-teacher conferences at the same time you're doing homecoming, at the same time you have, I don't know, science fair at the district. So it's a little bit, I will say, ridiculous to ask us to maximize the use of all parts of our building at the same time as we're maximizing the use of our stadium. And that would be the argument I would make to zoning hearing board and to the borough council is it's really a little bit unfair. We're going to prepare for this as best we can. And the other thing is the argument I typically make is you really don't want to see a sea of parking lots that are only filled 3 times out of the year. If you go to any mall, they're all overdeveloped with parking. You very rarely, except for the week around Christmas, see those parked full. And nowadays, everyone wants to be as friendly to the environment as they can. They want to have as much green space as possible. They want to cut down on runoff and so on and so forth. The best way to do that is not pave entire properties with asphalt. That doesn't make any sense, right? It kind of defeats the whole purpose. But again, those are the steps we're going to have to go through to get there. And I think, again, K&W has done, as Dr. August said, a very nice job of trying to design this to meet all the requirements for there. I don't personally believe how practically we're going to require more parking spaces when all we're doing is filling the same seats with different fans, right? Whether they're for a soccer match during the day or they're there for a JV football game after the sun goes down, it should conceivably be the same amount of requirement. But again, we're going to have to make that argument and prove that to the board, the borough council and the zoning hearing board.
And that can only happen after the traffic study happens during football season.
That's as I read this, yes, that is correct. Those are the steps that we have to go through.
Is the stadium lighting plan more than just the parking and traffic study, or are there more components to it, or is it really just traffic and parking?
I believe that is really what it is. I think they use that term to be encompassing just in case they think of something else. But to your point, if we put light stanchions up, it shouldn't change the occupancy. It shouldn't change anything else about that stadium. It should change the lighting.
I mean, it would.
And when we use it.
Right. That's what I was going to say. It would theoretically just, I think we lost audio. It would really just change how frequently we use it, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Not just because we're not moths, just because lights go up doesn't mean more people come.
That's kind of my point is whether we do it at Memorial Stadium or we do it here or we do it, same number of seats are going to be in this stadium, whether we have the lights or whether we don't have the lights. Could we get some more people standing? Maybe. I don't know. But it's difficult to figure, I don't know how you calculate that or prove that that's the case in one way or the other.
Another question I have is why, the verbiage, okay, so no varsity, JV or varsity football, but no lights. We knew that the multi-purpose stadium was also going to be utilized for track and field. It was going to be utilized for soccer and field hockey. So those numbers are not going to change. So why is the lights such an issue with these other athletic programs? This was never just about football.
I can't answer that question. That would be a question for borough council as to what, or the zoning officer, as to why, in particular, football is the triggering point. The only thing I can think of is they believe that's the highest attended sport that there could be out there, and that they just want to make sure to plan for that, and everything else will be good because it's not as attended as heavily as football.
Dave, could you talk a little bit about the costs that would run parallel to move this forward? If we're looking at lights, what costs would we incur as a district to move this forward?
Again, I think we would have to get the traffic studies done, the parking counts done, and then that would have to be put into the stadium lighting plan, whatever that turns out to be.
So there would be a cost to develop that plan, cost to do
A
the
design
study?
fee and some consultant fees to get that done.
Okay.
And then we'd have to go through the legal process to walk, if more parking was required, we're gonna have to go through that zoning hearing board variance again and that conditional use again, simply because of the requirement in the ordinances. And then the land development plan approval would really be the stadium plan. I don't think they're really separate. I think they're using those terms somewhat interchangeably, but they weren't defined as to what a stadium lighting plan would be differently from a land development plan.
And I think this is kind of the million-dollar question, Dave. Is it possible to get lights during this construction phase that we're doing?
I guess the question becomes, that's a question probably for the borough as to, hey, we can buy these off of CoStars and put them in at the same time and save the district a ton of money. We agree not to use them at night for anything unless we go through this process. I'm not sure, I mean, given our relationship with the boroughs at times, whether they would agree to that or not. I think they made it pretty clear by putting this language in the agreement that they want us to go through these steps before we put lights up.
Translation, a long shot?
We can ask and see where it is, but I don't, again, the way I read this language, I don't think they believe that we could do that without using the lights. So I think there was a purpose for the language that they put in the development agreement and the conditions that they put on our plan approval.
Yeah, but you're putting the lights up, you're taking away from a lot of other students. I mean, I understand we got to go to the borough, but I mean, they could utilize that stadium with lights at night, whether football is being played, whatever.
Yeah.
You're taking away from band, you're taking away from practices, you're taking away a lot of stuff from a lot of the students.
You are preaching to the choir. I don't disagree with that. Again, the question that you're asking as to why or what's the purpose of this, I can't really answer for you because that's in the minds of the borough council members and the zoning officer as to what the concern is.
I think, I don't know, I'm trying to put my mind in the mind of a borough council member, and I think the assumption has always been lights equals football. And until our last board meeting, when Mr. Scott and Mr. Bard said, what if we put up lights to do all kinds of other things that weren't football? And maybe that just had never crossed anybody's mind before, that we could, if we put up lights, we can have practices, we have more practices, more events, and it doesn't have to be football. We can still say no football until we get the stadium fully ready for football, but why not build lights to do all kinds of other stuff?
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. I live 5 minutes from West Shore Stadium for Cedar Cliff High School. They have all kinds of practice there. They have girls soccer at night. They have the band practices there. I agree with you 100%. You know, I drive by and that field is in use most evenings in the fall for some purpose, and it's not. More often than not, it's not football. So I get it.
So, and I think I know the answer to this question. So, reading the stadium lighting facilitating nighttime use shall not be installed.
Correct.
So, if we brought in portable lights, does that violate the? Or how much trouble would we be in?
We can certainly ask that question to see if that would be a possibility, and say we're going to use it. You know, we can't play full-blown games, but we can do practices there, and that would really help alleviate the need for field space at other fields, and it would help us spread out our schedules and so on and so forth, and see if they'd be amenable.
Off just to ask if we can put them up. I mean, we're going to pay a fortune on renting lights, and
I agree with you there too.
Agreed.
if we can put them up, I mean, to me, that's just like the end result. If they
Yeah.
can't, then maybe. But just they're going to spend a lot of money renting lights. If you just put them up, they're up and done.
Is there anything that we can approve from or the board can approve from our end to facilitate this? Like what the so is there anything outside before the traffic study that we could do that would be, or the board, if they voted to do that, would be meaningful to advance this concept?
I certainly think you could authorize, or we could get some quotes for the lights, so you know what you're talking about for the cost of lights. That's probably a CoStar's bid that's out there. Get the price for the lights. The unknown is what other improvements have to be done to do that. So we could get those numbers probably through, there's a couple CoStar vendors that do lights. We could ask K&W to do some sort of study as to, I believe K&W is going to tell you they think they've designed for the number of parking spaces are needed on that site.
I would agree. They've told me that.
And they have told me that as well. So I don't know that even authorizing them to do anything other than to start gearing up for a traffic study in accordance with the subdivision and land development ordinance, and then arranging the consultant to do the traffic counts, the football games they're looking for, and have those ready to go for the 24-25 football season.
So nothing else really that we can do prior to football, other than finding, or other than those traffic counts?
Well, we could sit down with the borough to find out what other requirements they might have for the stadium lighting plan and determine whether or not there's anything there that we could do prior to football season. Again, I think the big ticket items here are traffic counts. And my guess is they're going to tell us when we have to do the traffic counts. Because they're going to say, if you do it in the summer, it doesn't really count because that's not when we have football games. So that tells me that they're looking at a specific time frame in addition to the parking study.
Can this be amended?
We can ask them, but I'm pretty sure, did we sign this yet or no?
I believe so.
Okay.
So
We can go back and ask them to amend it, but the plan was approved on the basis of the language set forth in this agreement.
What's it gonna hurt to ask?
Not a thing. We can certainly ask.
Flat out ask. All you can say is no.
Right. That's exactly right.
Because I feel like this language was based on the assumption of lighting equals football. And what we're saying is lighting doesn't necessarily equal football.
I'm happy to ask that question. We are happy to float that up the pole and the flagpole and see what they say. And I agree with you. The only thing is they very specifically said lighting in some areas, and they very specifically said football and JV football in other areas. So I don't know what they were all thinking, but again, this is what they came up with.
I assume the traffic study trumps the 5-to-1 known ratio, otherwise they wouldn't bother.
Well, I think the traffic count has more to do, the traffic study has more to do with circulation as opposed to the parking side of it. Is that usually when you do the traffic study, that's to figure out bus loops and things like that, where we have to figure out circulation, we have to figure out how people are accessing the site, so on and so forth. And parking, that's why they're asking for the parking count separately, because they want to see how many people actually park at the game. The traffic study is to figure out how they got there.
And no requirement for bathrooms?
Again, occupancy doesn't change. We're building the stadium for the number of people we're sitting and putting in seats. They're going to base the number of toilets or bathrooms that we need on that, and that's building code. So that's outside of the zoning requirement anyway.
I guess I really don't understand the traffic study period, because they got one way in, one way out down there. We're gonna have like 3 ways out here. You could go out to the Wise, you could go out to Panola Road, you can come down between the schools and go out Park Place. I mean, there's gonna be, I just don't understand the traffic study deal.
I don't know that it'll yield anything differently than we've already showed for this stadium, the stadium project in the first place. But I think this is our pound of flesh.
That's fine.
Is there any reality where we could go ask permission to put in lights and agree not to play varsity football until we've met?
We can certainly ask that question, and that's where I've always said that it helps to have parents and school district representatives talk to their borough council members to say how important this is to them and what it would mean to them.
So to that, like when I pulled in here tonight, it was still daylight, obviously, but like there's kids in batting cages out here. Like that's another thing. Like with that softball batting cage would fall under lights, and if there was a fall soccer practice going on tonight, like there's kids who could be in there using a batting cage or whatnot. But I think one of the things that really caught my attention that you said, and I totally agree with, is that I would hope that we would not have to add more parking somehow over like no more than 6 uses a year. Like to me, that seems absolutely crazy. That would even be a consideration because one, we wouldn't use it. Two, it's a waste of district funds that we just sat through a budget and finance thing that like the parent loop, like we know it's not cheap to put stuff like that in. So it just doesn't make sense to me why. I would hope that we wouldn't have to do all that, but yeah, I'm all in favor of just asking that question.
So how do we, how do we?
Here's what I think we do. I think I sit down with the administration team and maybe Mr. Scott and whoever, and come up with a list of things other than football that we would like to do under the lights. And we put together a request to see if we can amend this development agreement on the basis that we understand we can't play JV and varsity football, but this would really be a boon to the school district, to our students, to the programs that we offer. And they're both sports and extracurriculars, including band, marching band, color guard, whomever, who would get the use of that field as well.
So Dave, just, and I don't expect you to necessarily know, but the number range that we've heard for stadium lights is somewhere between $800,000 and $1 million. Is that square with what you're seeing?
I honestly haven't seen any of those numbers. I could certainly, I know we can get those, but if that's what you're seeing, I mean, we can check again with the CoStar's contractors and vendors and see what's out there. They'll price it up for us and give you an idea.
Any other questions for Dave? So I guess that, as we move to that agenda item, I think part of what that says is about taking steps and move forward. So I guess you and I can connect on a kind of a get together to make that list of, here's why, here's why list.
We'll call them the non-football uses.
List. Okay. Thank you so much, Dave, for coming.
Thanks, everybody.
That concludes our committee of the whole. No way.
Clear these off.
They're not being broadcast.
That's what it was all about. They didn't really care about that.
For you two in space where I can ask you a question about cyber charter schools and the extracurricular activities.
I think so.
Just for a minute, is that still a problem for you?
Yes.
Okay, because I had
A certain cyber charter school in particular.
A lot of things in the world that ain't right, like the $4 million.
Not after, the one, what's his name?
We signed him, Calipari,
He's at, he went to
Arkansas,
Arkansas. And I
yeah.
heard Kentucky is not after. Early, it's coaching tonight.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he would be stupid.
All right.
He's got a powerhouse.
Gavel it.
He never was good.
Hello and welcome back to the Planning and Action Meeting of the Shippensburg Area School District. Christy, roll call, please.
Mr. Jim Bard,
Here.
Mr. Mike Carey,
Here.
Mr. Levi Kressler,
Here,
Mr. Darren Donovan,
Here.
Dr. Nathan Goetz, Dr. Michael Lyman,
Here.
Mr. Fred Scott, Mr. Kurt Noggle,
Here.
Mrs. Steph Eberly,
Here.
Mr. Aryan Gaunkar, Ms. Lily Cow.
Here.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we begin our deliberations this evening, let us once again be reminded of our duty to represent all of the children of this Shippensburg community, regardless of age, sex, race, or creed, and regardless of need or ability. This meeting is being live streamed and uploaded to the district's YouTube channel. May we now have a moment of silence to reflect on our thoughts and actions on behalf of the students of the Shippensburg Area School District. And may we also remember Romaine Jones, a 1958 Shippensburg graduate. Mr. August, are there any changes to the agenda?
No, ma'am.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve.
Motion made by Mr. Bard. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Lyman. All in favor?
aye.
Any opposed? Citizens' comments regarding agenda items. I see that there are two. Please identify yourself by name and the district in which you live and indicate the agenda item you're speaking about. Address all comments to the board as the whole and make sure they are in the form of a statement. Questions will be taken under advisement. Responses to questions will be offered after the deliberation and be provided by the superintendent. You will be allowed 3 minutes for your comments. First up is Miss Sharon Lawrence.
Hello, I'm Sharon Lawrence, 234 East Orange Street. I'm an employee here of the school district. Here in the high school, I'm the physics teacher. But I'm actually here tonight with a question from the school counselors. And it's in regard to the organizational chart that's up for discussion tonight. There was a concern expressed to them that they've moved to be under the Director of Student Services in the organizational chart. And they've been told that that is just for budget purposes, but their concern is that typically the chart is used for chain of command as far as complaints and supervision and things like that. And the school counselors are very tied to the buildings. They work very closely with their building principals and the students. And they just want to make sure that the person who is in charge of them, that they're actually working with in the chain of command, is their building principals. And that they aren't going to have to wait for decisions to be made by student services when they have a concern, or if someone has a complaint, or has praise, or has something that needs to be addressed towards the school counselors, that they can go through the building process rather than having to go through student services. So that was their concern.
I mean, I probably can feel this. We would just keep the same kind of working relationships that we have been successful in terms of the day-to-day, running of counseling services at the building level. The principal and those counselors would work closely together. From a budgetary standpoint, they do sit within that department, so there is obviously some benefit to that showing on an organizational chart.
Okay, and I don't know if there is any way to demonstrate both chains of command. I don't know if that's possible in your hierarchy, but that is the concern that we have.
Okay,
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Next up, Ms. Cup.
Hello, I'm Desiree Cup. I am a parent in the district, also a teacher. I wanted to thank you for adding some elementary positions to the preliminary budget tonight. But I'm here to also advocate and ask you to please consider starting the plans for our elementary schools to improve class sizes for student academics and social needs. I know that we've talked about maybe 5 years down the road, but I feel that by starting these plans, we're going to minimize staff stress, worry, and give a sense of care to our teachers and our staff. There's been many meetings. I watch every week from home, and there's many meetings that there's been consistent remarks made about how certain demographic of students, like ELL students, special education students, their needs are required services. But I also just want to make sure we're also in the front of our head that regular education students, their needs are just as important and are also required. I don't say that lightly. I am a parent of a child with special needs, so I do review everything that we do as a district there as well. But as a teacher, I think of all of my students and their needs. So my point here is that all students and their academic needs and successes should be a requirement to facilitate their adequate learning. And I understand the concept of phasing and stages that we keep talking about, but I want to argue that this concept is not complete without total plans for all the district's needs. Continuing to push it off in the future, we're just going to continue to run into budgetary questions without having the whole view when we're sitting down together now. So again, I just want to remind why we're all here, and it's to advocate for every student, all of our students, because our district is blessed, with amazing teachers, admin, staff, and families who, when we come together, we may argue or disagree or agree over facilities, taxes, etc. But I am sure that we are all here for the students, and that's our main goal. So I just ask that you take that into consideration.
Thank you, Mrs. Cup. Student representative reports, Ms. Kell.
Thank you. The all-night mini-thon party was held from April 5th to April 6th by the high school's chapter of Mini-thon, raising $26,100.36 for the Four Diamonds Foundations. Congratulations to senior Logan Holtree, who was crowned Mr. Mini-thon, raising the most money not only for the Mr. Mini-thon pageant, but most money as an individual with $1,505. The Mini-thon also held a Spirit Week from April 2nd through April 5th in celebration of their overnight party. The third annual trout fishing competition has now begun and is open for all qualified high school students. The senior trip to Pittsburgh will be held on Friday, May 17th, including a visit to the Pittsburgh Zoo and a dinner cruise along the Schuylkill River. The Leo Club is hosting a paper towel drive for all Block 1 classes. This donor drive benefits the summer camp for blind young people. Women's Empowerment Club will be attending the state capitol on April 12th, attending the Level Up conference, where they will have the opportunity to meet women in state legislations, lawyers, and lobbyists. On April 10th, Broadway Club will be traveling to New York City to go to Ellen's Stardust Diner and Sweeney Todd on Broadway. 9th and 10th graders have the opportunity of attending Mount Alto's Med Camp this summer. This camp focuses on science, healthcare, and medical services. Middle school happenings. Sam's Student Council hosted March Gladness, where teams competed against one another to raise the most money for Four Diamonds. Around $400 was given to Sash's Mini-thon from this event. The winning teams, 4 homerooms, had breakfast from Dunkin' Donuts. Sam's community event with ribbon cutting took place on April 4th. Student council members were gave tours, Mrs. Lard's class served light refreshments, and the event was well attended. About 20 8th grade students participated in Sash's Mini-thon. They were members of PBIS and Student Council. Scholastic Book Fair will kick off at Sam's on April 4th and run through the following next week. Thank you.
Dr. Lyman, you have the Franklin County Career and Tech Report.
I do. if you were here for the previous two meetings, one of the things that was mentioned was the Newcomer Academy. That is something that was also discussed at the Franklin County Career Tech meeting. Something that they're looking into. There are currently 1,100 students currently enrolled at the Career Tech, and 1,288 is as high as they could go. That is the 1,100 number is the largest ever student body they've ever had. So the enrollment is growing there. Shippensburg, however, has the lowest utilization of any of the sending schools. So hopefully, maybe our numbers will go up. I don't know. We went over the budget at the meeting as well. And then kind of a fun fact is that 60% of the staff there are graduates of that school as well, which I thought was interesting.
So can I just add to that report?
Yes.
So the Career Tech Center has been looking at ways to utilize their facilities to increase revenue. They are at the very end of the process to have the opportunities to have the Career Tech Center as a CDL testing site. So that's some exciting news. And the allied health, the medical assistants, they're planning to find a way to get them to enroll into the LPN program after graduation, so that would also help with the enrollment. And then prior to the board meeting, you were just rolling in, but Mr. Grove, who has 19 years experience as the diesel mechanics, he came to just to kind of admin recognition. He said that like there were 3 staffers. There was a kiddo there who just came to him and it's like, you know, Mr. Grove, like this is just amazing. The 3 staffers kind of just were laughing and joking around with him, and just how the culture in the building, he's like I've never kind of experienced this before. And Mr. Grove had gone to a personal development and spoke with different people at the different centers, and he said that, you know, 8 out of 10 people just kind of went into a rant about the admin, and he's like, I just kind of stood there because like I could not kind of join in to that negative talk. So he's like, you know, this just is not the norm. Like, we have it together. We have a great team. We have something special here. And it reminded me, there was something that Dwayne Burt and both Charlie Suiters both told me that, you know, Franklin County Career Tech is one of Franklin County's best kept secrets. And if you can have the chance to be on that board, get on that board and to participate. Like, it was a big agenda, but like there was just so much information that it's not just about trade school, but like they have like a little bit of everything for everybody. So I just wanted to share that positive news, and hopefully we can also get to that culture and make some systemic changes here.
I think just to add, one of the things I also learned is that they do significant amount of training of adults as well. It is not just for high school age kids. They do a lot of adult training in the same fields that they're training the high school kids.
Yeah. All right, policy committee.
That's me again. So policy committee met on the 2nd of April. We looked at 2 items that we are going to refer to the athletics committee. Those are the activity fees and the potential of bringing back intramurals to get more kids involved with sports who maybe can't quite make a team. We received a report on field trip costs and learned that those costs vary somewhat by building depending on the how active the PTO is at each of the buildings. We also received a report about coach surveys at the ends of seasons that was brought up at a previous meeting. We looked at policies regarding class size, non-resident students, discipline records, suicide awareness, and those are on the agenda for discussion, I believe, tonight. And then we are still working on the policies regarding public comment at board meetings. That was a big task.
Curriculum report, Dr. Donette.
The curriculum report is pretty brief this time around. We are looking at the science curriculum. You're going to start receiving those in waves we're going to start with the middle school and then the high school science classes. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that that's occurring. The way in which that's structured is that you'll be receiving a PDF with the information in it, and it will show you the ways that the teacher has broken the standards, the state standards, down into units that they will discuss and teach for the students, and they'll have learning objectives and essential questions. Do you have any questions for me on that? All right, that's everything. Go ahead. Did you have a question?
Superintendent's report.
Sorry.
Yes.
Wasn't one of those on the agenda for tonight?
Discussion.
There should have been for discussion.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So before I begin my formal report, I just want to give a shout out to our staff, our teachers, our secretaries, and our admin for dealing with today's eclipse and all the attendance things that went along with that. It was a Herculean effort on their part. And also let everyone know that the Mary Jane Taylor mini grants are available through the foundation. Yeah. Mrs. Fink asked me to give that a shout out. On to the donation report. Enrollment report. We currently are standing as of April with 3,701 students. We have broken the 3,700 barrier. As you can see, that's up a little under 100 from last year at the end of the year. Elementary schools, we have 1,165 grades K through 3. 4 and 5, grades 4 and 5 have 557. Our secondary school, middle school has 837, and the high school is sitting at 1,112 with 30 students placed in various placements for that grand total of 3,701. Donation report. We'd like to acknowledge receipt of the following donation from Jordan Weber, monetary donation to support the band at a value of $25. So thank you, Jordan. That concludes my report.
I just want to piggyback off of something that Mr. August had said. I had the opportunity to visit the middle school and the high school today, and I really just want to give a shout out to our school secretaries. Today they had faced an unprecedented influx of the early dismissal requests and diligently processed all of the absences while trying to manage their daily responsibilities with grace and efficiency. If you heard them answering the phone, you wouldn't even know that it was pure mayhem at times. So I just really wanted to give them a shout out because they kept it professional, and it's truly commendable just to see them and the school operations run so smoothly behind the scenes, even in the midst of today's eclipse. So just want them to know that they are appreciated and they are seen. Moving on to the consent agenda. Item 4A is the approval of minutes. Item 4B is the finance reports. Those are attached. 4C is the exchange student. The student would be from Spain and replaces the exchange student from Chile. 4D is the expulsion waiver, and that parent did waive their right to the hearing, and that student will be placed in the Keola program. 4E is the G Blues summer camps. G Blues would like to offer summer camps again this summer for the 2024 to children ages 6 to 10 years old. The proposed camp on-campus dates are as follows: June 28th and 29th, July 19th and 20th, and August 9th and 10th. Amanda Kirkpatrick, the Shippensburg Area School District K-8 gifted teacher, would also like to offer camps for elementary age students, and her camps offer hands-on STEM exploration as they are scheduled to be follows: June 10th through the 12th, June 24th through the 26th, and July 22nd through the 24th. All camps will run from 9 to 11:30 and will be located at G Blues on the SU campus. 4F is the commencement date and location for the class of 2024. Administration recommends approval for the class of 2024 commencement ceremony to be held May 30th, 2024 at 7 p.m. at the Lohr Center on Shippensburg University campus. 4G is the Power School quote. Administration recommends renewing the contracts with Power School for Schoology and the predictive enrollment analytics. Schoology is used for secondary students and costs $12,236. The predictive enrollment analytics is $11,285 and will help with the predicting future enrollment, and the cost will be $23,521. 4H is the YBot Wireless Monitoring Troubleshooting Center. Sensors. Administration recommends approval of the attached contract. The cost is $12,600, and the district will get an 80% discount and only have to pay $2,520. For I and J is the personnel portion. The first one that I'd like to acknowledge is Nancy Bender, the social studies teacher at the Shippensburg Middle School, for her retirement. Congratulations, Mrs. Bender. And then we have a number of leave of absences, transfers, and resignations. Is there a motion to approve items 4A through J?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Carey, second by Dr. Lineman. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to the action agenda. We have item 4A, the senior class trip. Administration recommends approval for the class of 2024 to take their senior trip to the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on Friday, May 17th. Students will be responsible for all expenses incurred, and transportation will be coordinated through the Shippensburg School District Transportation Office. Is there a motion to approve item 5A?
Move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Bard. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Kressler. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 4B is the grants for growing approval. Lisa Boltz, agriculture teacher and FFA advisor, is seeking approval to apply for and accept grants from the Grants for Growing, which is a grant program for our FFA chapter to develop and improve project-based or experimental learning opportunities. Ms. Boltz will apply for the grant, and if awarded, will be used to purchase small gas engines for the agriculture department. Is there a motion to approve item 5B?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Carey. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Noggle. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 5C, the robotics grant. Mrs. Fowler, a technology and engineering teacher at the high school, is seeking approval to apply for and accept grant for roughly $4,600 from the Greater Chambersburg Chamber Foundation. If awarded, the funds will be used to purchase robots for the use in the robotics course at the high school to replace obsolete technology. Is there a motion to approve item 5C?
So moved.
Motion made by Dr. Lyman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Carey. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 5D is the MOU in service. Administration recommends approval of the attached memorandum of understanding between the district and the Shippensburg Area Education Association regarding the in-service incentive program and the revisions to the 23-24 school calendar that added 2 additional in-service days at the end of the school year. Is there a motion to approve item 5D?
So moved.
Motion made by Dr. Lyman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Carey. Discussion? Mr. August, could you explain to the board why this is on the agenda and regarding the in-service days?
Sure. So within the collective bargaining agreement, there's an incentive for teachers to attend in services. Those dates had already happened, and to when we had those snow days, the board, at my recommendation, changed those to Act 80 days, which very similarly but count as student days. So 2 additional days to meet the contracted 186 had to be added to the end of the year. So in the spirit of that agreement, changing those days unilaterally, negatively or potentially could negatively impact members of the bargaining agreement or bargaining unit. So it made sense to allow this amendment to the contract to still keep with the spirit of the greater bargaining agreement.
So ultimately, there's an incentive because it's on the collective bargaining because teachers weren't attending the trainings or the professional development.
So I wasn't here for that negotiations, but I think that was obviously put in to incentivize teachers to attend those sessions.
Any further discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 5E, administration recommends approval of the attached MOU between the school district and the association regarding adding the Lego League academic competition advisors to the contract under supplemental positions and outlining the stipend for this position. The district and Volvo Corporation entered into an MOU regarding the creation of Lego League within the Shippensburg School District, which included payment of the Lego League advisor. The MOU outlines the stipend and payment for the supplemental position. Is there a motion to approve item 5E?
So moved.
Motion made by Dr. Lyman. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 5F, district branding. The Outreach Committee Administration recommend approval of the attached proposal for district branding. Is there a motion to approve item 5F?
So moved.
Motion made by Dr. Lyman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Kressler. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
5G is the summer technology purchases. Administration recommends approval for the technology department to purchase the technology equipment for the 24-25 school year early. If we wait until the budget is passed, we will not get the equipment until mid to late July. If there are any supply issues, then we will not get the equipment until even later. By purchasing the equipment now, the technology and maintenance staff will have more time to get everything installed, saving the district from paying overtime later and allowing the students, teachers, and staff to have equipment in place for the first day of school. The expense comes out of the technology fund balance, which include 50 interactive panels at $130,000, 325 Chromebooks and cases for $149,825, 25 computers for arts at $25,000, 60 computers for business tech ed classrooms at $48,000, 5 computers for robotics at $4,000, and 30 computers for nurses and secretaries at $18,000. Is there a motion to approve item 5G?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Carey. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Lyman. Discussion?
Once we made the purchase out of fund balance and then approve the budget, will money go back into fund balance, or is that not how it works?
No, that's not how it works. So think of your fund balance as a savings account. So we don't have these technology purchases within that.
Okay.
They're separate.
So either way, we were going to pay it out of fund balance.
Correct.
Okay.
I just want to add that I am apprehensive about allocating funds for technology purchases for the upcoming year without thoroughly vetting and approving the budget or having it in place. Specifically, I have concerns about the proposed purchase of the 50 interactive panels, especially if they are the box light boards. In my experience with visiting the classrooms, these panels have been proven to be less user-friendly and efficient compared to other alternatives. Difficulties in writing and erasing on the panels can significantly hinder teachers and the learning experience. Today, a teacher had shared that the box lights are pretty much just glorified projectors. The proposed expenditure on the 325 student Chromebooks and cases raises more red flags for me. While I understand the potential benefits of integrating technology into education, I'm still not yet convinced of the efficacy of our current approach. There seems to be an inconsistent expectation across the board, And I worry that some teachers are relying more on technology rather than fostering like a robust, engaged instruction. There's not consistency amongst even some of the grades. While it's easier to kind of do this wash, rinse, repeat with some of the curriculum, there are some classes, like same grades, that are very heavy with technology versus others that are more engaged and not using the technology. I think that considering the significant financial investment being proposed, totaling almost $375, it's essential that we really evaluate the necessity and effectiveness of these purchases. That's a large number to take out of a budget that we have not approved for this upcoming school year. We're not utilizing FID days. We're not relying solely on computers for communication and instruction, and we can do something that cyber charter schools can't do, and that's provide a robust face-to-face instruction. And we know through the budget that we're putting $1.5 million into for these outside schools. I feel like we need to get back to some of the profile of a graduate, like it's engagement, and I think that we really need to reassess some of our technology uses to make sure that they are efficient and there is some consistency.
Who put it on here?
It came from Dr. Stevens. This is his request. Are these the Boxlight interactive panels?
That's what I was planning on getting. I just emailed my tech staff because I've not heard any complaints. I've only heard a good thing about the Boxlight boards.
I think that it's important that we get a survey out to the teachers to see, like, at one point, I guess there was the whiteboards, and then it went to the Boxlight. They feel like they could utilize the whiteboards more so than the Boxlights. So I feel like getting input from the people that are going to be utilizing them.
We did, and the people we talked to preferred that one. But I know every building and every level they use them differently. I can check with the teachers and see which best suits their needs. They change every year what software they do.
Dr. Stephen, these 50 are replacements, correctly? Correct. So some of those that may be having issues.
Yeah, we have a priority list of the oldest ones, and the ones that teachers are having issues, they would be replacing ones that teachers have asked to have those replaced.
So I think that, like, even part of so let's just say if, for an example, in career readiness earlier, if she's trying to teach a student to write a check and she's writing it, like, there's no backspace, like, it's literally like you hit the trash can and it deletes everything, and then you literally have to start over. So, like, some of them are just not user friendly. Like, you can't just hit a back button, or like the storage, like where does it save? So I think that, like, some education and professional development, like, and technology, like, training to, like, how do you use and get full capacity of the technology that we have versus just replacing it, because I think that would be helpful.
Oh, I agree. More training on the technology would be ideal. But
It is a matter of fitting into a pretty tight professional development schedule, but we can certainly prioritize it.
We got some teachers out there. Can we ask them?
yeah.
Sure.
So I do understand your concern, and as Dr. Stevens can attest, I'm not one who currently has an interactive panel in my classroom, but I am one who's asked for one. Every teacher has different uses for them, but if you are currently using it and utilizing the tools correctly, you can do things in your classroom that you can't just do on a chalkboard. And that's why I have finally broken down and I've said, all right, I would like to have a Boxlight. Years ago, it was my job to train the teachers. And I trained everyone how to use the interactive boards. And we probably do need more training now that the technology has changed. But the tools that are on the old boards are here in the Boxlight as well, whether it's the pens, whether it's the erasers, but it also has the ability to show videos. It has the ability to have interactive, like your 3D immersion field trips. You had asked the other week, like, can we use it for ESL? And sure, like, we can put things up onto the board that could allow translations, that can allow, like, your drag and drop. Hey, move this to these matching things. For the Chromebooks, like, I need the kids to have Chromebooks because that's how it interacts with my science software. It's not just sitting in front of a Chromebook. Like, I need the kids to be able to collect data and then use the Chromebooks with sheets to display the data, to draw conclusions. Are there going to be some uses that are not the most interesting? I'm sure there are. I'm not going to try to stand up here and say that everyone has the most engaging lesson every time they use technology, but we need the tech to be able to do some of those things that you do think are cool and that do support our profile of a graduate. And I would say yes. For if we had training on it, I think you would see even cooler things going on. Did I cover it all? All right.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
So can I just get, were those, I know this is not a representative sample, but were those pro box? I don't even know if they are. I have to use chalkboards, and I'm a professor at a university, so you all are way ahead of me.
I mean, you've been in my room. I have chalkboard. I love my chalkboard.
Yeah. But those were all pro Boxlight votes out there? Okay.
I think the difference, I have the old, I'm one of the 50 because mine has not been working for the last 3 years correctly. And when it's not working, it is very difficult to teach a first grade class because my math curriculum shows on that board. My students can come up, interact with math. I can show them how to do the problem on that board. When it's not working, I can't do that. They come up, they write on the board and show how they do their work even in first grade. So in the elementary classrooms, you're gonna see them used nonstop. And it's not to take away from us teaching, it's to be able to reach the needs of all learners. And then when you're talking about Chromebooks, do we love them in elementary school? No. I mean, sometimes they're more of a hassle than not. However, we, since COVID, use them to differentiate. So what I created for my online classes, I could have 3 or 4 students working on because they're ahead of everyone else, so they're below everyone else while I'm working with these students. Our gifted students work on the Chromebooks because that's the only way they can get it. Our ELL students, their program is based on the Chromebook, so they do so many minutes with us, so many minutes with their ELL teacher. Our iReady assessments are on the Chromebook. But with that being said, in the elementary level, you could go 2 or 3 days and not even open a Chromebook. So it's just based upon what that week's goals are, really. That makes sense?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Good evening. And since we already had a high school teacher and we had an elementary teacher, I figured I would jump in and fill that slot for the middle school. To put some fears at rest, once we got out of COVID, we as a middle school knew that for general learning and even to focus at times on the PSSA, which is one of the assessments used to evaluate our students' learning and to evaluate our teaching, we said, we can't just continue to stay glued to Chromebooks. So as a member of the English department, we as a department really pushed getting back to pencil and paper, using real books. So whether it's using the Chromebook or using the Boxlight that is up in front of us, we use it more of a an enrichment device. We can read the Diary of Anne Frank, which we just did. We can learn about the Holocaust through articles and books that we worked hand in hand with the Media Center specialist to use the vast amount of information we have in our Media Center. But then we are also able to, as a class, move through the actual annex that Anne Frank had to hide in for over 2 years and use it as a enrichment to build a bigger picture of what was going on. We were able to also watch a YouTube video of drones doing an aerial tour of Auschwitz, which if you just read, maybe you don't get the full grasp of. So it's not the primary mode of instruction, but it is supplemental, which helps to, I believe, expand and elaborate on our learning in the classroom. So that's kind of how we use it in our department. I know that I can't speak for them in totality, but I know that our math teachers have also began pushing away from those lessons that they had built during COVID and producing more stuff on pencil and paper, and still using the manipulatives they use in the classroom, but also using it supplementally to expand on what we're teaching.
Thank you. Christy, did you say that does this current budget that we just went through, does it reflect this 375?
No, so anytime we come along and ask for fund balance purchases, it is separate from the budget. We usually get approval during the budget process, but we do not put these extra, I'm going to kind of call them one-time expenditures into the budget. We just ask for approval to spend fund balance money during the budget process. And this isn't the first time. We have asked for approval ahead of the budget process to do technology purchases.
So this says specifically the technology fund balance.
Correct.
Dr. Stevens, can I ask one question? I've used to ask this about like athletic uniforms, which clearly cost a whole lot less money than this. But like in terms of like computers, like do we have like a planned recycling? Like, is there a schedule for that? Like we know that we want to.
Yeah, there is a schedule, but like Google changed the life expectancy of a Chromebook.
Yeah.
It used to be 5 years, so we would replace them in 6th grade and 9th grade. Then the time that's left on them, they would go into the elementary. Now they've increased it to 9 years. So the Chromebooks we're going to give this kid in 6th grade, they're going to use that till they graduate.
Yeah.
And the way the cycle ended last year, we had to buy a lot last year, so we'll have to work in to replace stuff at the elementary later. But everything has a longer lifespan now.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Chromebooks don't have that long of a lifespan in my house.
Any further discussion? Christy, can you do roll call on this one, please?
Mr. Jim Bard.
Yeah.
Mr. Mike Carey.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mr. Darren Donovan.
Yes.
Dr. Michael Lyman.
Yes.
Mr. Kurt Noggle.
Yes.
Mrs. Steph Eberly.
No.
Motion carried.
Item 5H, the Summer Food Service Program and staffing for 2024. The Food Service Department would like to continue offering the summer feeding program for the 7th year. The program would begin June 10th through August 1st and would provide free meals to children 18 and under. Federal funds will receive from this program and cover all costs. Site participation is yet to be determined, and the participation is contingent upon meeting federal program eligibility for food service staff availability. The following staffing projections are needed to run the program: 1 kitchen supervisor at 40 hours, a 2nd kitchen supervisor, a head cook, 3 cashier helpers, 2 kitchen helpers, 2 kitchen supervisor substitutes, 1 head cook substitute, and 3 cashier helper substitutes. Staffing subject to change based on participation. Is there a motion to approve item 5H?
So moved.
Motion made by Dr. Lyman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Kressler. Discussion?
Just are these numbers going up as well in terms of utilization of this service? Do you have a sense?
I believe so. Do you know, Mrs. Smith?
Sorry to make you walk all the way up here.
That's why I came, right? Can you repeat the question?
Are we seeing more students using the summer food programs?
Okay, so last year in our first month, we fed more than what we did the previous year all summer long.
Okay, so yes.
Yes, so and that's because of our non-contingent meals for the weekends. The parents come and pick up the meals, and then they have breakfast and lunch for Friday, Saturdays, and Sunday.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 5I, No Kids Hungry Grant. Shippensburg School District Food Service Department is requesting approval to apply for and accept a summer meals grant through No Kid Hungry in the amount of $21,243.20. If awarded, the funds would be used to purchase 2 Oliver food package machines and the food service tray, plates, and ceiling film to be used to provide bundled meals through the feeding model. Is there a motion to approve item 5I?
So moved.
Motion made by Dr. Lyman. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Noggle. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item 5J, Primero Edge Food Service Software. Administration recommends the approval of the attached quote for the subscription of the state recommended food service point of sales software, along with the software enhancement that allows the digital pre-ordering to begin July 1st. The annual subscription amount is $6,540, along with a one-time implementation fee of $1,995 for a total of $8,535. The cost will be paid from the food service fund. Is there a motion to approve item 5J?
So move.
Motion made by Mr. Carey, second.
Second.
Second by Dr. Lyman. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item 5K, food service equipment purchase request. Administration recommends approval to purchase a new dishwasher for Nancy Grayson Elementary School. Currently, the one in the kitchen is no longer working and is beyond its useful life repair. The district received 3 quotes as attached and is recommended going with the lowest quote from Johnny's Food Equipment Supplies at a cost of $13,960, and this purchase will come from the food service fund. Is there a motion to approve item 5K?
So move.
Motion made by Mr. Carey, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bard. Discussion?
Are they washing by hand?
We're using styrofoam.
You volunteering?
No.
They're using styrofoam, so
They're using styrofoam?
yeah, it's
Okay.
causing extra dumpster service.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The Food Service Management Company recommendation. The district received 2 proposals for the Food Service Management Company request. For proposals, one from Metz Corporation and one from Chartwells. A committee of 4 district employees independently reviewed and scored the 2 Food Service Management Company proposals. The committee met on March 28th to discuss the evaluations and to select a company to move forward for board approval. The company unanimously recommends continuing these services with Chartwells. Administration recommends continuing with Chartwells. Approval at tonight's meeting allows the district to offer a summer meal program during the summer of 2024. Is there a motion to approve item 5L?
Move to approve.
Motion made by Mr. Bard. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Carey. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 5M is the water heater replacement at the middle school. The facility committee recommends approval to replace the 2 water heaters at the middle school at a cost of $52,900 by Man Plumbing and Heating, CoStar vendor. One of the old water heaters are offline now due to not passing inspection, and this will be paid from the assigned fund balance for capital maintenance. Is there a motion to approve item 5M?
So move.
Motion made by Mr. Carey. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Noggle. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 5N is the electrical infrared inspection and the de-energized cleaning. The facilities Committee recommends approval for the GR Sponigal to do the infrared inspection at all of the schools at a cost of $18,097. The Facilities Committee also recommends Lear Electric to do de-energized cleaning at Nancy Grayson, James Byrd, and the intermediate school at a cost of $8,000. This is to be paid from the assigned fund balance for capital maintenance. Is there a motion to approve item 5N?
So moved.
Motion made by Dr. Lyman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Kressler. Discussion?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm still tied up on this thing. Did a little research in there, and I think there's other companies out there that'll do it a lot cheaper. I could be wrong, but I think so. And I did a little looking around and some checking around. We could actually buy a infrared tester ourselves for like $6,000, and then certify one of our maintenance guys to do it, which the company will do that if you purchase a machine. So without having a couple other bids and exploring that whole situation, I'd like to table this.
Mr. Bard is making a motion to table this.
Correct.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Second by Mr. Noggle. Can we do roll call, please?
Mr. Mike Carey,
No.
Mr. Levi Kressler,
No.
Mr. Darren Donovan.
This is to table it, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Do you understand that?
No.
Why don't we take it from the top? So this is the motion to table this agenda item.
Okay. Mr. Mike Carey,
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler,
No.
Mr. Darren Donovan,
Yes.
Dr. Michael Lyman,
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard,
Yes.
Mr. Kurt Noggle,
Yes.
Mrs. Steph Eberly.
Yes.
Motion carried to table. 6 yes.
5O, number 15, door replacement at the high school. The Facilities Committee recommends approval to replace door 15 at the high school by the HPG windows and doors for a cost of $14,699. The bottom of the door frame is eaten away from years of melted ice and corrosion, and the doors will not close properly when exposed to direct sunlight. This will be paid for from the assigned fund balance for capital maintenance. Is there a motion to approve item 5O?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Carey. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Noggle. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item 5P, revised invitation to bid paving of parking lot at the administration building and other parking lot repairs at James Byrd and Nancy Grayson. At the January 22nd, 24 Planning and Action meeting, the Board of Directors approved administration to create bid specifications and advertise for expansion of the parking lot at the admin building. March 14th, Facilities meeting, the committee supported the administration's recommendation to revise the invitation to bid specifications to include alternates to reseal and restripe the parking lots and playgrounds at both the Nancy Grayson and James Byrd elementary schools. Is there a motion to approve item 5P? Sorry.
So moved.
Motion by Dr. Lyman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Kressler. Discussion?
Yeah, is there any way, I understand we're getting all three bids, but is there any way we can get them to us separately, like what it costs for Nancy Grayson, what it costs for James Byrd, and what it costs for the administration building? I understand they're bidding them all, but can we get that?
I believe that they are listed separately, so you have your base bid, which was the admin building, and then I think Mr. Barnhart listed each of the other schools separately as alternates. But I'd have to double check with them.
I guess I'm looking at being itemized, maybe that's what I'm looking for.
I think so.
I think that was our intent.
What's that?
I think that was our intent, was to get prices for those.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Moving on to the discussion agenda, we have item 6A, the 8th grade science curriculum. Administration approves approval of the attached 8th grade physical science curriculum. 6B is the organizational chart. 6C is the policies that Dr. Lyman mentioned earlier. 6D is the electricity contract. 6E, donation Boyo transportation. Please stop me if you need additional clarification. We'll, Mr. August can answer that in the meantime between now and the next meeting. 6F is the MOU between Shippensburg Area School District and the Shippensburg Area Education Association. 6G is the multi-purpose stadium project, add lights. 6H is the 24-25 proposed final fund budget. And then that brings us to the last citizens comment portion regarding non-agenda items, and there is one.
So Mr. Bard, Christy, can you talk a little bit about the?
Sure. So the way that, hold on, let me go back to that page. The way that we laid out the invitation to bid was there was the base bid, which is the admin parking lot. And then the alternate one was the sweeping, hold on, let me get to it. The alternate one was to sweep the entire parking lot and restripe. So that would be, I believe, he meant that at the admin building. And then add alternate 2 is Nancy Grayson and James Byrd together. Were you asking Mr. Bard to have Nancy Grayson and James Byrd separated?
Well, they can bid all three of them. I was kind of curious of what each one cost. I mean, what the admin building's gonna cost, and then to do Nancy Grayson and James Byrd. But I mean, it could all come in it'd be an itemized bill, not one of the amounts to.
So it's gonna be itemized in terms of, if you look in your packet, there's the bid form. So you're gonna see the base bid, which is just the addition to the additional parking area to the admin building. And then add alternate 1, you're gonna see the price to sweep the entire admin parking lot, fill in cracks, and restripe. And then add alternate 2, which is you're gonna see as a different cost, is Nancy Grayson and James Byrd schools, which is like to sweep, reseal, restripe.
They'll have a price for that.
It'll be all in add alternate 2. We won't know how much James Byrd is, and we won't know how much Nancy Grayson is.
For both buildings, I think both parking lots are in similar shape.
That's fine.
But I mean, if you really want to, I can see if we can break that down.
Thank you. Sorry.
Mrs. Coy?
Good evening. My name is Jocelyn Coy. I live in Southampton Township. I have 2 kiddos in the district, a 4th grader and a 9th grader, and I am also a teacher in the district for the past 20 years. So my name is Jocelyn Coy. I've been a teacher in Shippensburg School District for 20 years. I've had various positions, anywhere from a high school math teacher, 5th grade math and science teacher, and the past 3 years I've been the math interventionist at the middle school. This position has been funded by ESSER's money and is currently not set to continue, which is why I'm here speaking with you tonight. In my time at Shippensburg, I have always expressed concerns about not having math intervention or supports at any building, which is why I jumped at this opportunity 3 years ago, and I'm deeply concerned for the students moving forward. I've worked with hundreds of students these past 3 years. We have focused on basic foundational skills and number sense. Not only is there an academic component to my position, but I also spend a lot of time focusing on students' confidence. Math anxiety is real, and at the middle school level, research suggests that 20 to 25% of our students experience math anxiety at some level. I would 100% agree with that, if not higher. Middle school students either love or hate math. The students I see usually hate it, but but it's because that they don't understand it and then they just give up. I work very hard on helping the students become more confident in their ability and helping them see that everyone is capable of understanding math. Seeing the students' feelings about math change and having them come to group excited to share what they are understanding and what is happening in core is an amazing feeling for not only myself, the students, and their core teachers. Students aren't afraid to ask for help or volunteer in class, and they are becoming those critical thinker and problem solvers, which is what we are working on as a district. During my past 3 years as a math interventionist, I have also been part of our child study team. Students are referred to the child study team for academic, behavioral, or social concerns from our teachers. All referrals and paperwork is submitted to me. I take care of reaching out to our parents, setting up the meetings, completing the notes prior, during, and after meetings, along with providing the math interventions recommended by our team. As a team, we are able to identify if a student needs the extra support to get them back on track, or if there's the possibility of a student needing to be evaluated for special education services. For this process to be successful, we need to hold 3 meetings every 6 to 8 weeks and progress monitor between meetings. If myself and the reading interventionist are no longer available next year, how will this process continue? How will the district be able to support the students having these needs? We have wonderful resources K-5, reading specialists, reading and math coaches, and hopefully more math support with a grant that is coming based on the last board meeting. How can we allow all of these supports just to stop at our middle school level? How is it fair to those students who need that extra support but don't necessarily qualify for special education? I don't believe that the struggle we are seeing can be blamed on COVID anymore. They are systemic, and they won't just magically disappear at the end of this school year when ESSER's funding is no longer available. We are trying to create a profile of a graduate for our students to be collaborative, innovative, and critical thinkers. I'm now asking you as the board to do the same. Discuss, be creative, think outside the box, and come up with a solution to help benefit all of our students. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
Thank you. I'm Susan Spicka. I live at 11 South Prince Street, and I have like 3 different comments. So first, school funding advocates tomorrow are going to start asking people to go to school board meetings to ask their boards to pass a resolution in support of a constitutional school funding system. So it's kind of like the one that the board passed before the lawsuit decision was made. And I will email it to Mrs. Lentz and Mr. August and let them look it over and then pass it along to the board so you can consider whether you'd like to talk about it and pass it or not. But it's basically asking the legislature to take the full amount that's proposed in the budget, which is 1/7 of what it's going to take to get us to constitutional funding and to approve it this year. Also wanted to talk about the cyber charter funding. So my organization every year does extensive right to know requests and then gets back advertising and other wasteful types of spending expenditures. And so we're getting to release a report about that. We're going to do that in a couple weeks. Those of you who know and are good friends with your Republican lawmakers, I would just like to say the only reason that cyber charter school funding reform is dead on arrival in Harrisburg is because Republican senators are defending it. They are the only obstacle to cyber charter reform getting put across the finish line. And I will tell you, Commonwealth Charter Academy, they own 46 different properties in Pennsylvania. And if we take a look at their 990 form, they made in 2022, they reaped $100 million profit. They had $250-some million in cash and in reserves, and then they were sitting on top of a $305 million pile of assets. So I would encourage you to look at CC at Commonwealth Charter Academy's 990 form, and that is from before they raked in all the COVID money. So any suggestion that a $8,000 per regular education tuition per student is going to do something to CCA that's going to cause them to not be able to educate kids is just like a bold-faced lie. So happy to talk to anybody about any of this when it gets closer. And then finally, the borough is looking at getting a police dog. And I don't know what that would mean for the school district. But I would hope that if the borough gets a police dog, that the school district would really think carefully with your solicitor about the type of liability that could be incurred by us as taxpayers for the district if you bring in a German Shepherd that could end up biting a kid. Like, what kind of liability insurance do we need in the district? And then also, you know, if this dog is in here sniffing and finding things and starting some kind of pipeline to incarcerate students, I don't know that that is really the value of this community, taking kids who might be making a mistake and sending down the carceral pipeline. So if the borough does approve this dog, I hope the board will really think about it. So thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Information date savers. The Transportation Committee will be meeting April 25th, May 1st, Safety and Security. May 7th at 6 p.m. there will be a special board meeting to discuss bids for the stadium project, review asset protection and for general purposes. May 8th, Athletics Committee. May 16th, Facilities Committee. April 17th, Act 80 Day, and I realize I skipped over board comments. So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Carey.
I'm good, thank you.
Mr. Kressler?
Yeah, I have a bunch because I always do. But this first one is something I've thought about since we met 2 weeks ago and kind of tied it together. If you look at the audience, you'll know what I'm talking about. But I'm still a quote from Dr. Al Moyer, who was our interim superintendent for a while. And I think he's an incredible guy and had a ton of experience. But his quote that he told us as a board back when was that he truly appreciates and believes in public education schools, that they're the great equalizer. I totally agree with that in society. I think public education is the great equalizer. With that being said, I don't think our students can succeed without the help of all of our teachers. So I just want to say thank you. I know you guys took a little bit of heat, whatever. So, but thank you for all of everything that you guys do, because we couldn't do what we want to do without all of your help. Going past that, baseball team defeated Big Spring 6-1. The softball team also beat Big Spring 6-1. That's awesome. I did see that Riley Mullen got her 100th career strikeout as a pitcher last week. They had the middle school grand opening last Friday after school from 3 to 5, which was really cool. They had the biggest scissors I've ever actually seen in person to cut that. And Mr. August and Miss Eberly struggled a bit, but they did overcome some adversity, and they were able to cut that. There's been a ton of social media posts from Mr. Hess back there with Booster Club fundraisers for all kinds of different things and clubs. So if you like bingo, it seems to be there's a lot of bingo coming up. Chicken dinners are always on sale, and I think I saw one that's going to go toward the senior all-night party funding. If you eat at Arugas either tonight or tomorrow night, so maybe tomorrow night because it's 9:07. And then one more thing, and I found this to be really cool because I always give these updates about our sports teams, but in the history of our high school, we have won 103 league championships. They're really cool. Those, and just to give some comparison, Greencastle only has 101. They're behind us. Waynesboro 67, Big Spring 60, I think 62, West Perry 55, James Buchanan 32. All that said, no pressure on all of our spring sports teams, but I would love to add to that number here this spring. So that's all I have.
That's it. Mr. Bard.
None tonight.
Mr. Donovan.
Have we gotten any updates on predictive enrollment analytics?
We had training last week. They're still reaching out to townships to get the data, and then when they do, we'll have a better picture of what's going on. But myself, Randy, Mr. Bybee, and Dr. Stevens sat down and looked at the tool and how to use it.
Dr. Lyman.
So I would just second the middle school ribbon cutting ceremony. That was a great event. It's a nice win for the district. That was really nice. Also a mini-thon. My daughter is still sore from dancing, so I had no idea they earned that much money. That is an incredible amount of money. So congratulations to everybody involved with that. I know they presented at the board meeting a few months ago, and so good job there. I loved this agenda full of robots and Legos and all kinds of stuff. I like to see those kinds of creative things that are happening for our kids in our district, and really applaud the teachers that are kind of doing that going that extra mile to help our students. And it was really nice to have them here, teachers, to sort of help us with our decision making tonight. I don't really think you should come to all of our board meetings because that's asking a lot, but I appreciated your comments tonight. But you're welcome to come. And then just finally, I know the science curriculum was on the agenda. I don't really know, and I know Ms. Donna could probably talk more about this and will in the future, but lest we only talk about stadiums and football, I would really like us to hear about where these curricula come from and why we do these. We didn't get a lot of time to discuss that tonight, but those are important. Math, science, English, those are all important things to talk about as well. So I'd like to hear about that as well. Thanks.
Mr. Nagel?
Nope, no comment.
So I know everyone's already mentioned the grand reopening, but to see our student council at the middle school giving tours every 10 minutes, they literally knew about the lights and how they were motion censored, like they really knew that wing of the building inside and out. Mrs. Layard's class literally escorting us from the entrance down to the cafeteria. And the food was just a bougie little setup. It was very fancy, and I didn't know what to expect, but that wasn't it. So they literally knocked it out of the park, and it was definitely a win for the district, and I appreciate Site Logic being there. Just some of the staff that had also came, so I just want to say thank you. Kind of like that grand reopening and a fresh start. And that's all I have for tonight.